Have you ever felt the weight of a realization so sharp it unsettled you? Like walking into a quiet room and suddenly noticing every sound, every shadow, as if the world had shifted without warning. In that moment, you see what others cannot. The music that once thrilled you grows dull. The voices you once chased begin to grate, and the circles you once begged to enter no longer feel like home. This awakening is not gentle. It tears away illusions, and with it comes a strange loneliness, a hunger to explain yourself, to shout your discovery so the emptiness feels less heavy. But here lies the test. The urge to speak is often the voice of ego, desperate for praise, desperate to be seen. The truth, however, is like a seed, fragile when first uncovered. Pull it out too early and it dies in your hands. Leave it in silence, and it grows roots strong enough to weather any storm. So the question is not whether you found something real, but whether you have the strength to protect it. Stay with me and we'll walk deeper into that silence together. As we step into the first chapter, picture this. You are climbing a narrow mountain path. The air is thin, each breath heavier than the last. You glance back at the valley and realize something striking. Not everyone can follow you here, not because they are wicked, but because they're not ready. They are still moving through trails you abandoned long ago. If you hand them the map to your summit, they will laugh at it. They have not earned the view, and they will mock what they cannot yet see. Seneca once advised, associate with people who are likely to improve you. To share your altitude with those unprepared is not kindness, it is waste. Here is the hard truth. You are not here to convince, you are here to evolve. And evolution makes little noise. It does not announce itself in grand speeches or declarations. It unfolds in silence. In the moments when you choose discipline over indulgence, when you walk away from chaos instead of feeding it, when you sit still in your pain until it forges you rather than rushing to bury it. These hidden choices harden you, layer by layer, into something unshakable. People applaud words, but it is silence that builds a spine of iron. Now imagine the moment of clarity when the storm clears. Chaos arranges into order. Betrayals, failures, confusion, suddenly they reveal a pattern. A sense of purpose pulses through your chest. In that moment, the urge to share is fierce, to speak, to announce, to pour it out for others. Yet, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, if someone can show me I am mistaken, I will gladly change, for I seek the truth. Notice carefully, he did not vow to trumpet every insight. Truth must be tested before it is taught. Speak too soon, and you place something sacred into careless hands. They may laugh, doubt, or dismiss it. Not because it lacks value, but because your connection to it is still fragile. I once knew a man who broke free from years of addiction. One morning he woke before dawn, stepped outside, and felt reborn. The world seemed brighter. His lungs felt clean. For the first time, freedom wrapped around him like air. But instead of keeping that silence to strengthen him, he hurried to tell those still chained. They laughed. They mocked his past. They told him it would not last. And slowly their doubt became his doubt. His insight had been real, but not yet deep. Haste betrayed him. This is why silence is not weakness. It is the ground where your truth grows roots, strong enough to face the storm. Wisdom itself cannot be destroyed, but your grip on it at first is tender. Like lightning, revelation dazzles and disappears unless grounded. Silence is the ground. Stillness is the anchor. Ask yourself, how often have you narrated your transformation while it was still forming? How many times have you weakened your strength by explaining the story before the ending was written? Every time you speak too soon, you surrender fire meant to temper you. Silence is gestation. Allow truth to carve you before you carve it into words. Here is the paradox. Once you have truly lived it, you will no longer feel the need to speak. Without speaking, others will read it in your stillness, in the way you carry yourself, when the world around you trembles. People will sense the shift in you before they can name it, and when they ask, your words will not seek approval. They will simply unveil what already is. Epictetus gave the reminder: don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Embodiment is power. To walk as though the lesson is already whole. To stop leaking transformation like a draft of an unfinished book. To carry yourself as if the work is already complete. That is untouchable power. That is the kind no ridicule can pierce. So pause when the impulse to prove yourself rises. When a revelation presses on your lips, ask, is this for the world or for me to live first? Most times, the answer will be silence, and in that silence, your roots will push deep, beyond reach of laughter or doubt. When you finally speak, it will not be to persuade, it will be to reveal. This is the quiet law of growth. Few speak of it because it cannot be explained, only lived. At first, truth is electric, but electricity burns out unless channeled. Only silence gives it form. Only silence transforms the spark into fire that endures. So guard your secret. Let it mature in the dark soil of solitude. In time, you will see you no longer need to shout. You have become, and your becoming will thunder louder than any speech. And as this first step closes, a new path opens. The path of learning why silence, though heavy, is the only soil where wisdom grows strong. Moving into the second chapter, picture this. You hold fire in your bare hands. At first it glows, warm, almost divine, but in moments it scorches your skin. You drop it, you burn yourself, and you burn those around you. This is what happens when you try to carry truths before you are strong enough. The first realization is not the transformation, it is only the spark. And sparks, when handled too soon, destroy more than they illuminate. Now imagine pouring a sacred tea into a cracked cup. It leaks. It stains the floor. The taste, the warmth, the gift, it is lost. Speaking about your insight too quickly is the same. Words are vessels, and if your life is not ready to hold them, they spill. People drink nothing but fragments. They walk away confused. And worse, you walk away doubting what you saw. The Stoics understood this clearly. Epictetus warned, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. To speak without embodying is to draw a map of a land you visited only once. The mountains will be misdrawn, the rivers misplaced, the scale all wrong. Those who follow that map will lose themselves, and you will carry the blame. So silence after revelation is not punishment. It is protection. Protection for your soul to align mind and body with what your spirit now knows. Protection for the wisdom itself, so it can sink deep into habit, into character, into the marrow of your being. Until your daily actions carry the breakthrough, it is still only thought. And thoughts are fragile. They bend to wind. They change shape under the eyes of others. Let me tell you of a young man who once felt clarity strike him like lightning. He had struggled with anger for years, exploding at small insults, breaking relationships with his fire. One morning, after reading Marcus Aurelius, he woke with a calm he had never felt before. He thought he was cured. He ran to his friends, to his family, preaching peace. But when mocked, when pressed, his old fury erupted again. They laughed louder than ever. He crumbled. His insight had been real, but it had not yet hardened into strength. His mistake was not awakening. His mistake was speaking before living. This is where ego wears the mask of generosity. "I must share this truth," it whispers. But the wise do not rush to teach. They let their lives become the lesson. A tree does not scream when it bears fruit. It grows slowly, silently, and with power. And when its branches spread, those who are meant to rest in its shade will find it. You do not need to announce the harvest. Presence is proof. Think about how presence works. A man who has suffered yet walks calmly through insult. A woman who holds her dignity when all around her is chaos. They do not need to explain what they know. You feel it. Their restraint carries more weight than any speech. Their patience teaches without words. This is mastery. But understand this too. There are those who feed off your insecurity. They use your fragile growth to affirm their comfort. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your steps forward remind them of their stagnation. They do not want you to be right, because if you are right, they must change, and change terrifies them. So they challenge you. They doubt, they mock, not from malice but from fear. If your root is not deep, you will wobble. Their resistance will pull you back. That is why silence must come first. Not forever, only long enough for your truth to harden. Long enough for your actions to match your words. Speak only when your words no longer need agreement. Share only when rejection cannot shake you. Then you are not convincing. You are simply revealing what already is. Seneca once wrote, "Things that were hard to bear are sweet to remember." So let your silence bear the weight now, so your strength becomes sweet later. Let the discipline of restraint shield you. Let your deeds sharpen into a testimony. For once you have embodied the truth, no ridicule can steal it. No doubt can undo it. Here's the paradox. When the time finally comes, you may discover you no longer need to say anything at all. Your presence will announce it. The way you treat others without seeking praise. The way you hold your ground without raising your voice. The way you live in alignment while others scramble for validation. These speak louder than explanations ever could. And so, as we leave this chapter, remember the fire in your hands. Do not burn yourself. Let the flame settle into a torch, steady and bright, before you raise it for others to see. Because from here, we step into another truth. How silence does not just protect you, but begins to transform the way others see you without a single word spoken. Advancing to the third chapter, imagine this: a seed buried deep in the soil. It does not speak, it does not announce itself, but slowly, invisibly, it changes. Roots form, the stem begins to push, and one day the world sees a tree where once there was only dirt. This is what happens when you hold your insight in silence. It works on you quietly. It changes the way you rise in the morning, the way you listen without interrupting, the way you walk away from what no longer deserves your presence. These are the signs of true transformation. They do not seek applause. They do not need a stage, but they are undeniable. People around you may not be able to describe it, yet they will feel it. A new gravity forms around you. A calm authority, a quiet weight. That is the energy of someone who has discovered something sacred and held it long enough to become it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Presence becomes the proof." So the next time you feel a revelation rising within you, resist the urge to explain. Let your stillness cradle it. Let silence be the soil. Let your actions water it until it grows strong. Because in time, when the seed has become a tree, you will not need to convince anyone. They will come, not for your words, but for your way of being. And when you finally speak, they will listen, not because you are loud, but because your silence has already made them curious. Here's the painful truth few will accept. Not everyone is ready for what you have found. Not everyone has eyes to see what you now see. Not everyone has the heart to carry what your soul has been shown. When wisdom first arrives, it feels like a gift. You want to share it as if you're handing over treasure, but the mistake is to believe it will be received as treasure by others. It will not, especially if they did not ask for it. Especially if they are still clinging to the illusions you were meant to escape. The very nature of truth is disruptive. It cuts through illusions. It shines light into corners where people would rather sit in shadow. It demands change, but change is uncomfortable. So when you carry truth into places unprepared, it will not be embraced. It will be resisted, rejected, sometimes even attacked. Picture it. A room full of people who have been asleep for years, their eyes adjusted to the dark, their comfort built on silence. Then suddenly you burst in with a flashlight, eyes wide, full of excitement. You believe you are helping them, but to them you are a threat. Not because your light is false, but because it unsettles the world they have built around their sleep. Timing matters. A truth spoken at the wrong moment is no better than a lie. That is why wisdom demands patience. To know something deeply does not mean you must preach it immediately. Your task is not to convert others. Your task is to embody it. To live it so fully that your life itself becomes the evidence. If someone is not already seeking truth, your words will sound like noise, or worse, judgment. This becomes hardest when the ones you love are still asleep. You want them to wake. You want them to grow. You want them to see what you now see. But the Stoics teach us transformation cannot be forced. It must be chosen. Seneca wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance. Awakening is never an accident. It is an act of will. Until they choose, your explanations will only fall against closed doors. So guard your discovery. Let it season your character. Let it alter your habits, your priorities, your strength. In silence, the seed becomes a tree. In patience, your truth becomes unshakable, and when at last you speak, you will not be persuading, you will be revealing. Remember this, words can awaken curiosity, but only presence can awaken respect. Let your life carry the weight your voice alone cannot. And from here, we move toward another lesson, the cost of forcing wisdom into places it was never meant to be, and the deeper power of letting truth choose its own time to speak. Let's step into the fourth chapter and see this image. A butterfly rising into the air, wings shimmering with fragile strength. It floats above the ground it once crawled across, but notice this, it does not go back to drag the caterpillar from its cocoon. It cannot. The transformation must be lived through, not handed over. Flight cannot be gifted. It must be earned. And so it is with truth. However much you long to pass it on, however much you ache to share, the path belongs to each soul alone. Now, imagine scattering seeds on concrete. Each seed heavy with potential, each one capable of forests, yet nothing grows. You water them, guard them, wait. Still nothing, because the ground is not ready. This is what happens when you deliver deep insight to the unready. The seed of truth cannot sprout where there is no soil. You exhaust yourself in the effort. You end up unseen, unheard, even betrayed. And the pain you feel is not proof your truth was false. It is proof you misjudged the ground where you planted it. Here's the sharper edge of wisdom. There is arrogance hidden in the belief that it is your duty to awaken others. It is not. Awakening is personal. Seneca reminded us, "The sun also shines on the wicked, but it does not call them to virtue." You may carry words sharp as lightning, but no matter how well you speak, if their spirit is closed, your insight cannot land. You may want to shake them awake. You may want to plead, to show how much better life could be. But until they choose to open their eyes, they will fight your light, and they will fight it hard. This is why silence becomes the ally of wisdom. When you remain silent, you are not abandoning the truth. You are honoring it. You are saying, "This is sacred. This is not for entertainment. This is not for idle talk at a crowded table. This is a key that unlocks doors, and I will not hand it to someone who insists on staying locked inside." So what then? Let your life be the invitation. Let the way you live create the question in their hearts. Let your peace disturb their chaos, not by preaching, but by existing. Marcus Aurelius urged himself, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That is the Stoic way. You do not convince, you embody, and embodiment cannot be ignored. Think about it. If you have truly absorbed something powerful, it will change how you stand. It will shape your voice. It will alter your priorities. You will make different choices without announcing them. People will notice, even if they cannot name what has changed. A new weight will surround you. And when they are ready, truly ready, they will ask. And when someone asks from a place of openness, then, and only then, the door is prepared to be unlocked. That is how transformation spreads. Not by pressure, not by argument, but by resonance. You live your truth so deeply, so silently, that it radiates outward. It becomes magnetic. Those meant to rise will feel the pull. They will not come to argue. They will not come to debate. They will come to learn. I once met a man who tried the other way. He discovered philosophy, tasted stillness for the first time in years, and it thrilled him. But he rushed to his family, to his friends, eager to drag them along. They mocked him, rolled their eyes, dismissed him. He grew bitter. He thought they had rejected truth. But in time he saw it. They had not rejected truth. They had rejected being forced. Months later, when he stopped preaching and simply lived with new calm, one of those same friends asked quietly, "What changed in you?" That question was the beginning, not because of his arguments, but because of his presence. So guard your treasure. Not everyone deserves the key. Not everyone wants the key. Some will fight to remain in the dark because the light reveals too much. Let them. It is not your task to carry them into dawn. Your task is to hold your flame steady, to embody clarity until it glows through your actions. And remember, people do not follow words. They follow energy. They follow the peace that cannot be shaken, the calm that cannot be provoked. They follow the one who has walked through fire and returned without the smell of smoke. That is what inspires. That is what awakens. So protect your silence. Keep the sacred close until the ground is ready. And when that moment arrives, you will not need to shout. You will only need to live. From here, the journey bends toward the next lesson, how protecting your wisdom is not withholding from others, but preserving the strength that will carry you further on your climb. From here, let us step into the 5th chapter and hold this picture in mind, a flame resting in the hollow of your chest, flickering but alive. You guard it in the quiet corners of your heart. You do not rush to show it. You let it grow inside you until it becomes steady enough to endure the winds outside. The world may not be ready, but you must be, because if you try to hand out your fire before your foundation is strong, others can smother it. You risk being pulled back into the very shadows you escaped. That is the silent danger of sharing too soon. Your truth may be real, but if it is still fragile, the wrong environment can crush it. That is why you hold it close. That is why you let silence build your strength. In time, when the ground is ready, they will hear you. Until then, you walk your truth in peace. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Let your craving for approval die. Guard your truth until it has matured. Here's where a deeper lesson begins. There is a profound difference between strength and power. Strength is the ability to act. Power is the discipline to refrain. Many misunderstand mastery. They confuse loudness with strength, dominance with control, and performance with presence. But true power, the kind that bends lives and alters futures, does not announce itself. It does not enter rooms demanding recognition. It carries no need to prove. It is composed. It is quiet. Think of someone who has walked through pain, faced fears, battled weakness, and emerged tempered. They carry an aura that cannot be faked. They do not rush to prove themselves. They do not fill the air with their own voice. They listen, they weigh, they watch. And when they finally speak, their words strike like a hammer, not because they are loud, but because they are earned. This is restraint. And restraint is the mark of someone who has power, but chooses mastery over display. Now imagine the opposite. A crowded hall, screens lit up, voices shouting over one another, everyone desperate to be seen, to be liked, to be praised. Social gatherings, social media, even intimate conversations have become stages. Everyone's talking, few are listening, everyone's sharing, but so little of it carries depth. It is all noise. Amid that noise, the ones with true power are not the loudest. They are the ones who understand that some truths are too sacred for public consumption. Wisdom is not a trophy to show off. It is a fire to be protected. Marcus Aurelius counseled himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice, he did not call power the ability to command attention, but the mastery of self. And self-mastery reveals itself in restraint, in the ability to let someone be wrong without the need to correct them, in the ability to remain still when provoked, in the ability to choose silence over the impulse to dominate. That is not cowardice, that is clarity. I recall a man I once knew, quick-tempered and sharp-tongued. He had knowledge, but no mastery. Every slight, every insult, he felt compelled to answer, and so he wasted himself in endless conflict. Years later, I met him again, different. He had suffered loss. He had been humbled, and in that humility, he had learned restraint. Now, when insulted, he smiled faintly and said nothing. His silence spoke louder than any comeback. People noticed. They treated him differently, not because he demanded respect, but because his presence carried weight. Here's the truth that cuts. The moment you feel the need to prove yourself, you have already surrendered your value into someone else's hands. That is not power. That is insecurity, dressed in the mask of confidence. Real power does not need display. It holds itself in stillness until the time is right. So let your silence be your training ground. Resist the urge to scatter your wisdom too soon. Guard your flame until it is strong enough to weather storms. Let your restraint shape your posture, your voice, your choices. The world may not understand, but they will feel it. And when they are ready, they will come to you, not for your noise, but for your depth. At this stage, we are reminded, mastery is not about how quickly you speak, but how fully you live. Protect your truth. Honor your silence. For from this soil of restraint, we step into the next lesson, the sharpening of wisdom through stillness, where silence itself becomes both shield and sword. Entering the 6th chapter, imagine this. A fighter steps into the ring, his shoulders loose, his face calm, almost unbothered. The crowd looks at him and doubts. He doesn't flex, he doesn't boast, he barely moves. Yet beneath that calm lies years of discipline, scars of defeat, lessons carved into his bones. And when the time comes, his strike is precise, unstoppable. Why? Because his power is not in what he shows, but in what he withholds. There is a discipline in keeping your truth within, in not needing the world to validate it. Some things are meant to be lived, not shouted. When you discover something that changes you at the core, your first instinct may be to tell everyone, to proclaim it, to spread it wide. But wisdom is not a performance. Wisdom is practice. It must first be digested. It must take root in your habits, in your choices, in the small, unseen hours of your life. Without that, your insight is just noise. Think again of those seasoned martial artists. The dangerous ones are never the ones bragging in the corner, arms raised, eyes searching for recognition. The dangerous ones look ordinary, relaxed, even underestimated. They do not need to announce themselves. Their discipline has already done the talking. Their restraint is not forced. It is natural, born of repetition, of humbling defeats, of victories that cost them everything. They have learned the essence. Power is not what you show. Power is what you do not need to show. And the same is true within a wisdom. The more you know yourself, the less you need the world to know you. The deeper your insight, the less you hunger to argue. You stop wasting yourself in debates. You stop chasing applause. You even allow others to underestimate you, to misjudge you, to mock you because you no longer require their agreement. That is real power. Silent, anchored, unshakable. But restraint is not only protection, it is sharpening. Every time you hold back when it would be easier to lash out, every time you choose presence instead of performance, you forge your inner weapon. You train your warrior, not the warrior who fights recklessly, but the one who stands aligned, precise, effective. Instead of scattering your energy outward trying to convince, you channel it inward to refine yourself. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Restraint frees you from that suffering, because with each act of silence, your awareness deepens. You begin to see more clearly who deserves your energy and who does not. You recognize who is ready and who remains closed. You learn to distinguish what is real from what is illusion. That clarity becomes your compass. It guides your actions with intention rather than emotion. I once knew a woman who carried this discipline like armor. In her younger years, she argued with everyone, colleagues, family, strangers. She felt compelled to win every conversation, to prove her worth with words. But after years of turmoil, she grew tired. She turned to the practice of stillness. Slowly, she stopped explaining herself. She let her silence carry what once required defense. And people noticed. They began to treat her with a new respect, not because she demanded it, but because her restraint revealed strength. She had shifted from reaction to deliberate expression. That is where transformation happens, when your life stops being a reaction to the world and becomes an intentional display of your truth. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Restraint is the art of holding to that principle. It is the maturity to let others be wrong without losing your peace. It is the discipline to resist the craving to be right. Understand this. Restraint is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is the highest form of control. It is the refusal to let the world dictate your voice. It is the choice to act only when the moment is ripe. The moment you no longer react, you rise above. You stop being tossed by the waves of other people's judgments. You stand as the shoreline, steady, immovable, guiding. And in that stillness, you discover a freedom deeper than applause, deeper than argument. You discover the freedom of not needing to prove anything. That is the mark of inner maturity. That is the strength that Stoicism calls us toward. So, guard your insight. Let it season you in silence until it becomes natural. Train your restraint as if it were your greatest weapon, because it is. And as this lesson settles, we move forward to see how silence not only trains your strength, but reshapes how the world responds to you, often before a single word is spoken. At this stage, imagine this. You arrive at a point where your peace is no longer up for negotiation. No sudden storm, no cruel remark, no shifting circumstance can drag you from your center. You hold yourself steady as if rooted in bedrock. And here is the remarkable thing. Others feel it. They may not understand what has changed. Some may even resist it, threatened by a calm they cannot shake. But they feel it all the same. Slowly, almost against their will, they begin to treat you differently. Not because you demanded respect, but because your restraint made them curious. It made them wonder, what does this person know that I don't? And when they finally ask, you will know they are ready. You won't have to persuade them. You won't have to argue or defend. Your words will land because you waited, because you honored the truth enough to protect it, because you didn't squander your strength trying to display it before it had matured. That is what it means to walk with quiet power. That is what it means to know the secret and keep your mouth shut. There comes a moment in every path of growth when the most powerful action is to say nothing, not because you have nothing worth saying, not because you are weak, but because you have come to see that silence itself is a language. And when used with wisdom, silence speaks louder than argument, louder than justification, louder than defense. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is mastery. Think back to the early days of your own awakening. The cup overflows. You ache to pour it into every ear, to shout it from rooftops, to share everything you've seen, felt, realized. But time, the relentless teacher, reveals a harsher lesson. Not everyone is listening with the same depth. Not everyone is prepared to hold what cost you so much to discover. And not every space deserves your voice. That is when silence becomes a conscious choice, not from fear, not from submission, but from clarity. In silence, you begin to uncover your true motives. You are forced to confront yourself. Are you speaking because you crave validation? Are you arguing because your ego demands to be seen as right? Or can you remain quiet, protecting your energy, letting others remain mistaken without disturbing your own balance? This is where silence proves sharper than speech, because once the noise of defense is stripped away, all that remains is truth, bare, unpolished, unshakable, and standing before that truth without distraction is where real growth begins. The Stoics always returned to this stillness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul." The world rushes, shouts, performs, reacts. But you do not. You pause, you watch, you wait. You learn to hear not only the words people speak, but the silence between them. You notice patterns most ignore. You see the masks that others miss. You feel the intentions hiding beneath tone and gesture. And with each act of restraint, your perception sharpens. This is not some mystical gift. It is awareness by design. It is built layer by layer in silence. Think of the greatest martial artists. Their strength is not in raw muscle. It is in their patience, their ability to observe, to remain unshaken, to wait for the exact moment. Their calm is their shield. Their stillness is their power. And when they strike, it is not rushed. It is precise. It is final. So it is with inner mastery. When you have learned the discipline of silence, your presence becomes undeniable. You don't fight to be noticed. You don't clamor to be heard. And yet people lean in closer, unsettled by the calm that contradicts their chaos. They feel your depth without a word. They sense your weight without explanation. This is where real power lives. Not in the shouting, not in endless explanations, but in the quiet gravity of someone who no longer needs to prove. Someone who has discovered that the right moment will come, and when it does, their words will fall like stone into water, rippling outward long after the sound has faded. So protect your peace. Guard your silence. Let others feel the shift without forcing it into words. And when the right time arrives, when curiosity has ripened into openness, then your words will cut through, not because you pushed them, but because you waited. I once knew a teacher who practiced this. In meetings filled with noise, where others argued, demanded, interrupted, he often said nothing. He listened. He observed. People dismissed him as passive. Yet when he finally spoke, the room fell silent. His words carried weight, not because he was louder, but because he had waited. He had respected both the moment and himself. That is quiet mastery. If you have ever felt the strength of silence, write just one word in the comments: silence. And if you are walking this path with me, subscribe so you don't miss the next steps of this journey, because from here we turn toward another lesson, how stillness itself sharpens your vision until you see the world with eyes that most never open. Moving into the 8th chapter, picture this: a warrior waiting at the edge of battle, his face calm, his posture steady, his breath even. He does not rush forward in fury. He does not waste his strength with noise. He watches, he waits, and when his blade finally moves, it is not out of anger. It is out of readiness. That strike is clean, precise, and unstoppable. Life, too, demands the same discipline. When you have mastered the art of silence, you no longer speak to fill the void. You speak only when there is something worth offering, and when you choose to stay quiet, that silence is not weakness, it is deliberate power. Think of your relationships. Silence can be more healing than confrontation. Sometimes, the people you love do not need your lecture. They need your steady presence. Sometimes, they do not need your voice. They need the chance to hear their own. By not rushing to interrupt their process, you give them the gift of space. Space to think, to reflect, to grow. That kind of silence is not neglect. It is trust. It shows you believe they are capable of finding their own path, just as you had to walk yours. That is not abandonment. That is love in its strongest form. And when it comes to your own suffering, silence becomes sanctuary. You do not need to broadcast your wounds to validate them. You do not need to narrate your recovery to prove it is happening. The deepest healing often arrives in the quiet. When you sit alone, stripped of distraction and opinion, You finally allow yourself to feel what must be felt. And then, slowly, the broken pieces begin to realign. Not because you forced them, but because you gave them room to settle. Silence does what words cannot. It lets the soul breathe. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Men seek retreats for themselves, in the country, by the sea, in the hills. But nowhere can a man find a retreat more peaceful than in his own soul." That is what silence becomes. Your retreat, your fortress. It is where you guard your vision from those who would weaken it. Because the more you speak about your dreams, your plans, your goals, the more you expose them to doubt, envy, and interference. But when you hold them close in silence, they gather strength. They root themselves deep. They are no longer fueled by applause. They are sustained by purpose. Think of builders working in silence. For months, even years, nothing visible appears. Yet beneath the ground, foundations are being set in stone. And then one day, the walls rise, and the world finally notices. What seemed sudden was actually years of quiet construction. So it should be with your life. Let your success make the noise. Let your peace be the proof. When you keep your intentions sacred, they harden. They become immovable. But silence teaches more than protection. It teaches patience. Life will provoke you. People will test you. Challenges will arrive like storms, demanding reaction. And yet, silence teaches you to wait, to observe, to respond from strength rather than impulse. This does not mean you never speak. It means that when you do, your words are sharp, clear, and necessary because they have been tempered by restraint. They carry weight because they were not wasted. I recall a craftsman I once knew. He was a quiet man, often mistaken for simple. He did not rush to offer his opinion. He did not fight to be heard. But when a crisis came, all eyes turned to him. His words were measured, his advice clear, his presence calm. Why? Because he had learned to listen first, to let silence ripen his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his words landed like iron. People trusted him not because of his volume, but because of his depth. His silence had already done the work. This is the truth so many overlook. They think power must be loud. They believe wisdom must be explained. They confuse noise with influence. But the Stoics remind us that the opposite is true. Real power moves quietly. Real wisdom holds itself back until the time is right. Epictetus once said, "First learn the meaning of what you say and then speak." When you master silence, you do not lose your voice, you give it gravity, and gravity cannot be ignored. So guard your silence. Let it be your shield, protecting you from distraction and provocation. Let it be your compass, guiding you through storms without panic. Let it be your sanctuary, where your wounds heal and your dreams take root. And when the time comes to speak, let your words be few but heavy, forged in silence like steel in fire. Remember this, silence is not the absence of power, it is the presence of mastery. And when you master it, you no longer need to prove yourself with volume. Your calm presence becomes proof. Your restraint becomes influence. Your stillness becomes unshakable strength. From here we turn toward the next lesson, how silence, carried faithfully, becomes not only protection but also revelation, a mirror that exposes the truth of others even when they try to hide it. Entering the 9th chapter, see this clearly. The world tells you that truth must be shouted to be real, that to be heard you must climb onto rooftops and cry out. But those who truly understand know otherwise. They know silence is not emptiness. Silence is full. It carries strength, depth, and insight. It is your boundary, your meditation, your guard. Silence is not the absence of words. It is the presence of mastery. So once you know something deeply, truly know it, not just in the mind, but in the heart, the body, and the marrow of your soul, resist the urge to proclaim it. Do not waste it by scattering it like cheap coins on the street. Let it live in you. Let it carve your actions. Let it refine your habits. For the world does not need more noise. The world needs people with the courage to remain silent until their moment comes. And when that moment arrives, you will speak. But you will not speak to impress. You will speak to illuminate. Until then, let silence remain your teacher. Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." So do not waste the sacred by turning it into spectacle. The path to wisdom is not paved with speeches. It is carved in silence, hammered into shape by restraint and walked in solitude. Think of the early mornings when the world is still and it is only you and your breath. That is where becoming takes place, not in applause, not in validation, but in quiet perseverance. Think of the late nights when you replay the choices of the day, not to punish yourself, but to refine your direction. That is where growth hides. In the pauses, in the restraint, in the decision not to spill everything you carry. And here is the paradox. When you come to understand this, you no longer feel the desperate need to convince the world of who you are. You stop chasing validation. You stop fighting battles your soul has already outgrown. You realize you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You simply become. That becoming happens in moments that leave no trace, in the way you choose to respond instead of react, in the words you choose not to say, in the victories you do not need to flaunt. In the pain, you do not parade for attention. There is something profoundly powerful about the one who no longer needs to be loud. That kind of power cannot be denied. It does not bend when praised. It does not wither when criticized. It is rooted. Picture a mountain unmoved by the storm. The winds rage, the clouds crash against its shoulders, but the mountain stands. Or a candle whose flame does not flicker in the wind, steady and sure, even in the chaos. That is the power of one who holds a secret and chooses silence. They are not withholding from others. They are protecting the sanctity of what they have earned, because that is what truth is, earned. Truth is not a prize you stumble upon. It is gained through lived experience, through nights of pain and mornings of failure, through decisions that cut, through losses that scar, through the quiet perseverance of getting back up again and again. And when you finally hold that kind of truth, you no longer want to display it cheaply. You want to protect it, because you know what it cost you. I once met a man who had endured loss that would have broken most. He did not speak much of it. He did not wear his suffering like a badge. But when he did speak in short and measured lines, his words carried weight. They cut through the noise like a blade. People leaned in, not because he demanded attention, but because his silence had prepared the ground for his voice. That is the mark of truth held and honored, not spilled carelessly. So hold your truth close. Let it live in you until it shapes you beyond recognition. Let it become visible not through explanation, but through presence. And when you finally open your mouth, the world will know that what you say was earned. It will know it is not just thought, it is life. From here, we move toward the final stage, how silence, once fully mastered, transforms into a legacy, leaving behind strength that endures even when no words remain. Advancing to the 10th chapter, imagine this. You carry a vessel of clear water in your hands. You do not spill it, not because you fear loss, but because you respect its weight. You move slowly, carefully, understanding that even the smallest motion carries consequence. Wisdom is like that. It is not a jewel to be displayed. It is not a performance to impress others. It is a force meant to transform. And before it can shape anyone else, it must first reshape you. So you hold it within. You let it soften your anger when insults tempt you to explode. You let it sharpen your focus when the world distracts you with endless noise. You let it quiet your ego when pride begs to be seen. And gradually, this wisdom turns into a compass, one that does not fail, even when paths vanish, even when night falls and the road is hidden. You stop searching outside for direction because you have learned to listen to the silence inside. And in that silence, clarity arises. Alongside it grows something even rarer, peace. Not the fragile peace that lasts only while everything runs smoothly, but the deep, enduring peace that no longer requires control over what goes wrong. The peace that remains steady when others misunderstand you, when they question you, when they challenge you. You no longer rush to defend yourself because your energy is sacred, your time is sacred, your inner state is no longer up for negotiation. That is when life begins to shift. Not because the world outside bends to your will, but because you have changed. And that inner change, though subtle at first, becomes undeniable. You walk differently, with grounded confidence instead of restless haste. You speak differently, with fewer but heavier words. You decide differently, guided by intention, not desperation. You give your energy wisely. You guard your silence fiercely, as if it were a fortress wall. Noise no longer invades your heart. Confusion no longer steers your path. You have become still, and in that stillness you find strength. A strength far greater than shouting, far greater than proving. People sense it before they can name it. They may not understand why they lean toward you, why your words fall with unusual weight, why your calm feels like shelter in the storm, but they feel it, because you have done what most refuse to do. You have gone within. You have sat long enough in silence to understand that not every truth requires a witness. Not everything you discover must be spoken. Some truths are meant to live only inside you. The world will tempt you to spill them with applause, with arguments, with the lure of recognition. It will try to drag you back into noise. But remember, you are not here to be loud. You are here to be clear. You are here to be anchored. You are here to be real. And sometimes the most authentic act is to say nothing at all. I recall a man who lived much of his life in quarrels. Every slight drew him into battle. Every insult demanded a defense. He was exhausted by endless skirmishes, drained by his need to answer all things. In time, worn and wiser, he began to choose silence. He stopped fighting battles that did not matter. He let mockery pass by without reply. At first, people mocked him more, mistaking his quiet for weakness. But as the years passed, their tone shifted. They began to notice his steadiness, the way storms broke around him, but not within him. And they respected him more when he said less. His silence became his shield. His restraint became his strength. This is what it means to let silence teach louder than words ever could. Your life itself becomes the lesson. Your restraint becomes proof. You no longer need to raise your voice. The weight of your presence does the work. Seneca once wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Delay is another name for silence. To pause instead of react. To protect your peace instead of throwing it into the fire of conflict. That is not weakness, that is mastery. And what is mastery if not clarity in action? It is walking differently because you are no longer moved by vanity. It is speaking differently because you no longer seek validation. It is choosing differently because you have learned that desperation is a poor guide. Wisdom becomes visible in your composure, in the steadiness of your decisions, in the way you spend your energy only where it matters. The Stoics taught that a man who commands himself commands more than kings. When your silence becomes your strength, you stop being a servant to the crowd. You stop living at the mercy of applause or criticism. You stop being tossed around by the tempests of opinion. Instead, you become anchored, steady, immovable, like a mountain unmoved by storm, like a flame that does not flicker in the wind. This is why the one who holds a secret and chooses silence is not withholding from others. They are protecting the sanctity of what they have earned. Truth is not handed down freely. Truth is carved into you through pain, through failure, through difficult choices, through the quiet perseverance of rising again after each fall. And once you have earned such truth, you do not throw it casually into the marketplace of chatter. You hold it, you respect it, you let it transform you fully before you offer it sparingly to others. So let your life become the proof of what you know. Let your actions echo the lessons carved by hardship. Let your restraint reveal the strength within you. That is how respect arrives without being asked. That is how influence spreads without force. That is how you become untouchable, not by noise, but by presence. And in the end, this is the paradox of wisdom. The more you know, the less you need to say. The deeper your insight, the more at ease you become with silence. For silence is not emptiness, it is truth at its most powerful. Yet once a truth has taken root, another trial awaits. Stillness has strengthened it, but stillness cannot be the final stage. What begins in restraint must grow into tested strength. Every season of waiting eventually gives way to movement. Every guarded seed must one day break the soil and meet the sun. From this quiet foundation, we now step into the lessons that reveal how silence, once embodied, begins to shape the way you live, the way you stand, and the way others feel your presence. Entering the next chapter, picture yourself standing at the edge of a river. The water is clear, yet swift. You bend down, scoop it up in your bare hands, and try to carry it across. Within seconds, it slips through your fingers, spilling, wasted. This is what happens when you attempt to carry wisdom before it has taken form in you. It leaks, it scatters, and what might have nourished you becomes a loss for both yourself and those you wish to help. Now imagine that same river harnessed into a vessel, sealed, guided. The water no longer runs wild, it serves, it sustains. That vessel is silence. It is the container that allows your realization to mature, to hold its shape, to become useful. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And how much more do we waste when we spill our insights before they have ripened into lived truth?" Here's the reality. The first realization is not the final transformation. It is only the beginning. A spark, not a fire. And sparks, when touched too early, burn hands unprepared. I once knew a man who found sudden clarity in his suffering. One morning he woke with resolve burning in him like a torch. He ran to his friends, eager to declare his freedom from old vices. They smiled. Some even laughed, and with each smirk, his conviction dimmed. By nightfall, doubt crept back in, and his breakthrough felt like a dream already fading. What failed him was not the truth itself, but his haste to hand it over before it had become part of his bones. The Stoics warned against this rush. Epictetus advised, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Notice the order, be before you speak." Act before you teach. Live before you announce. To do the opposite is to sketch a map of a country you have barely walked. The roads will be wrong, the mountains misplaced, and those who follow will stumble into confusion. And worse, their confusion will weaken your own fragile step. Silence after realization is not punishment. It is protection. It is the shelter where your thoughts align with your deeds, where the flash of insight becomes steady practice. Without that shelter, wisdom remains fragile. Thoughts are not stone. They are clay, soft, impressionable, easily reshaped by ridicule or doubt. Speak them too soon, and the careless voices of others can twist them, bending what was once straight. I recall another story of a young woman who tasted clarity after years of anger. She woke one morning with a heart unexpectedly still. She smiled for the first time in months without effort. Convinced she was free, she hurried to declare her peace. Yet when insult struck her that same week, her old fury roared back. The people she had preached to mocked her collapse. Their laughter cut deeper than the insult. Her truth had been real, but untested. Silence would have given it roots. Haste exposed its fragility, and here lies the hidden mask of ego. It whispers, "Share this now, let them see your light." But this eagerness often disguises a craving for praise, for validation, for applause. The wise are not so quick. They allow their lives to speak before their lips. Like a tree bearing fruit in quiet strength, they let time reveal their harvest. They do not scream to prove their growth. They stand, and those who need shade will find it. Think of the weight of presence. A man who endures insult without reply. A woman who carries calm when chaos swirls. Their silence is not absence, it is testimony. Without words, their restraint teaches more than speeches ever could. That is mastery, the strength to hold back, the courage to wait until your truth no longer trembles in the wind. But understand this, not all opposition is malice. Many who mock you are not cruel, but afraid. Your clarity exposes their confusion. Your growth reveals their stagnation. If your roots are shallow, their fear can uproot you. Their resistance is not a judgment of truth, it is a defense of their comfort. Yet if you speak too soon, their fear becomes your chain. That is why silence must guard you, not forever, but long enough for your truth to harden into certainty. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, if it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it. Simple words, but within them a demand for discipline. Wait until your words are so true, so tested, that they cannot be shaken by rejection. Wait until they require no agreement, no applause. Then, when you finally speak, you will not be convincing, you will be unveiling what already is. Here's the paradox. Once the truth has been lived so deeply that it becomes you, you may no longer feel the urge to declare it. Presence makes speech unnecessary. People will see it in the way you stand, the way you act, the way you endure. And if words do come, they will land with weight. Not because they are loud, but because they echo a life already lived. Think of a sculptor whose chisel marks tell the story before he ever opens his mouth. The object in his hand tells the story of his patience, his discipline, his mastery. He does not need to boast of his skill. The finished work does that for him. So too with wisdom. Your actions become your testimony. Your silence becomes your shield. Your restraint becomes your authority. So the next time you feel revelation rising, pause. Ask yourself, is this ready to be spoken, or must it still be lived? Most often the answer will be silence. In that silence, your truth gathers weight. In that stillness, it grows roots no ridicule can rip out. When you finally speak, it will not be to persuade, it will be to reveal. Remember this: words can mislead, but presence rarely lies. Let your presence bear the weight your voice cannot yet hold. Let your silence be the crucible where truth hardens into strength. And when the time is right, you will discover that the most powerful truths need no announcement, they simply are. And from this silence, another lesson emerges. The way wisdom, once embodied, alters not only how you stand, but how the world begins to stand before you. Moving into the next chapter, imagine holding fire in your bare hands. At first it glows warm, almost divine, filling you with wonder. But within seconds, it scorches your skin. You drop it, you burn yourself, and you burn those around you. That is what happens when you try to carry truth before you are strong enough. The first realization is never the full transformation. It is only the spark, and sparks, when handled too soon, destroy more than they illuminate. Now picture yourself pouring a rare tea into a cracked cup. The fragrance rises, the steam curls into the air, but the vessel cannot hold it. The tea leaks, it stains the ground, it is lost. That is what happens when you speak too quickly about your insight. Words are vessels. And if your life is not ready to hold them, they spill. People sip fragments, not the fullness of what you meant. And worse, you begin to doubt yourself, wondering if the truth was ever there at all. The Stoics saw this danger clearly. Epictetus cautioned, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. To speak without first embodying is like sketching a map of a land you've only seen once in passing. The mountains will be drawn crooked, the rivers misplaced, the scale all wrong. Those who follow that map will wander lost, and you will carry the blame. This is why silence is not punishment. It is protection for you and for the truth itself." I once knew a young man who struggled with anger. His temper destroyed friendships, opportunities, even his health. Then one morning, after reading the words of Marcus Aurelius, he woke with an unfamiliar calm. He thought the storm had passed forever. Eager, he ran to declare his new self to those who had suffered his rage. But when mocked, when pressed, the old fire returned, burning hotter than before. His words, spoken too soon, collapsed beneath the weight of ridicule. His insight had been real, but not yet strong. His mistake was haste. This is where ego hides behind the mask of generosity. It whispers, "Share this wisdom, give it away." But often that rush is not for their sake, it is for yours. It is the hunger to be praised, to be admired, to be seen as awakened. The wise resist this impulse. They do not rush to teach. They let their lives become the lesson. A tree does not scream when it bears fruit. It grows in silence. Its shade appears, its branches spread, and those who need shelter find it. Look closely at the people who carry quiet strength. They do not need to argue their worth. Their restraint speaks louder than their claims. They endure insult without flinching. They walk through noise without breaking stride. Their calm teaches more than speeches. Their presence carries weight no boast can match. This is mastery, not in declaring, but in embodying. Yet you must also see the danger. Some people feed off your insecurity. They will doubt your clarity, not because it is false, but because it disturbs them. Your growth exposes their stagnation. Your vision unsettles their blindness. And so they challenge you, not out of malice, but out of fear. If your root is shallow, their resistance will shake you. Their laughter will weaken your resolve. Silence spares you this. Silence hardens your truth until it no longer bends beneath pressure. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Truth must be lived long enough to withstand rejection. Until then, it is vulnerable. So guard it. Let it ripen in your character. Let it alter your habits. Let it shape your daily choices. Only then will your words carry the weight of reality. Here's the paradox. Once your truth has hardened into action, the urge to explain it fades. Your life itself becomes the testimony. Others will notice, even without understanding. They will sense a shift in how you stand, how you act, how you respond. And when you finally speak, your words will not seek agreement. They will simply reveal what already is. Seneca once wrote, "Things that were hard to bear are sweet to remember." Let your silence bear the weight now. Let your deeds sweeten with time. For once truth has been lived, it cannot be taken by ridicule nor undone by doubt. That is the difference between speaking too soon and speaking when ready. So remember the image of fire in your hands. Do not drop it in haste. Let it settle into a torch, steady and bright, before you raise it for others to see. And recall the cracked cup. Do not waste what is sacred on vessels unprepared. Here is the lesson carved in silence. Wisdom shared too early is wisdom betrayed. Wait until your life itself can hold the truth without breaking. Then, and only then, let your words flow. For by then, they will not be arguments. They will be revelations. And as we close this reflection, another door opens. The way silence, once honored, not only protects what is within, but begins to shape how others experience you, even before you speak a single word. Advancing to the next chapter, imagine a seed buried deep in the soil. It does not shout. It does not demand attention. It waits. Slowly, quietly, it changes. Roots reach downward, unseen. The stem begins to push upward, and one day the world sees a tree where once there was only dirt. This is what happens when you keep your realization unspoken. It works on you in silence. It reshapes how you rise in the morning, how you listen without rushing to reply, how you walk away from what no longer deserves your presence. Transformation announces itself not in noise, but in gravity. You may not even realize it at first, but others will. They cannot name it, yet they feel something different about you. They sense weight in your presence, a calmness that is not ordinary. This is the energy of someone who has discovered something sacred and held it long enough to become it. Marcus Aurelius urged, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." The point is clear. Embodiment carries more force than explanation. I once knew a craftsman who embodied this truth. He rarely spoke of his skill, but his work carried a quiet perfection. The chairs he built, the tools he shaped, even the way he handled wood, all spoke of discipline honed through years. He never advertised his craft, but people sought him out. They wanted to learn not just his techniques, but his way of being. His silence had carved him into a teacher without words. So the next time you feel a breakthrough rising within, resist the urge to declare it. Let your stillness cradle it. Let silence be the soil, your actions the water, and your patience the sunlight. In time, when the seed has become a tree, you will not need to convince anyone. They will come to you, not for your arguments, but for your way of being. And when you finally do speak, your words will carry weight, not because they are loud, but because they come from a life already lived. But here is the harder truth. Not everyone is ready for what you've seen. Not everyone has the eyes to notice or the strength to carry it. When wisdom first arrives, it feels like a gift, and you want to share it as if passing treasure into every hand. But the mistake lies in assuming it will be received as treasure. Often, it will not, especially if no one asked for it, especially if they are still clinging to the illusions that your truth was meant to break. The very nature of truth is disruptive. It cuts through veils, it shines into corners where people prefer to remain in shadow. It demands change, but change is uncomfortable. So when you bring your clarity into places unprepared, it will not be welcomed. It will be resisted, even attacked. Imagine entering a room where everyone has been asleep for years, their eyes adjusted to the dark, their comfort built on silence. Then you burst in with a lantern. To you, it is kindness. To them, it is assault. Not because the light is false, but because it unsettles what they have learned to depend on. This is why timing matters. Truth spoken at the wrong moment is no better than a lie. Seneca reminded us, no man was ever wise by chance. Wisdom is deliberate. It must be lived first. Your task is not to run through the streets preaching. Your task is to embody, to let your life become evidence. And if someone is not already searching, your words will fall as noise, or worse, as judgment. I recall a woman who learned this painfully. She found peace after years of struggle and rushed to share it with her family. She begged them to change, pleaded with them to see. They mocked her. They accused her of arrogance. Their rejection wounded her more than her old pain ever had. Only when she stopped preaching and quietly lived her new calm did things shift. Months later, her brother came to her, asking softly, "How did you change?" That question opened a door that arguments never could. This is the discipline silence demands: patience. To live truth without forcing it on others. To trust that when the soil is ready, the seed will take. Until then, you honor the sacred by keeping it close, by letting it root in you so deeply that it cannot be shaken. And so transformation must be chosen. It cannot be imposed. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Your freedom comes not from convincing others, but from mastering yourself. Live your insight long enough that it hardens into character. Let it show in your calm under insult, your discipline when others break, your peace when the world shakes. These things speak louder than declarations. Here is the paradox. Once your truth has become part of your being, you will no longer need to announce it. You will simply live it. Others will feel it before they understand it. And when they ask, your words will fall into open hands, not clenched fists. So let the metal rest in the forge. Hidden from view, it hardens with every strike, until no storm can bend it. For the tree that grows steady in the hidden soil will one day stand unshakable in the open air. From here, the journey bends toward another lesson, the futility of forcing wisdom onto those unready and the quiet power of letting truth invite rather than impose. Let's step into the next chapter and see this image, a butterfly rising into the air, wings trembling with fragile strength. It does not return to pull the caterpillar from its cocoon. It cannot. Transformation is never handed over, it must be lived, and so it is with truth. However much you long to share it, however much you ache for others to see what you see, their path belongs to them alone. Now imagine striking a flint in the rain. Sparks fly, but none take root in the wet ground. No matter the fire within the stone, the moment is wrong. You water, you wait, you hope, and still nothing. The problem is not the seed. The ground is not ready. This is what happens when you deliver deep insight to someone whose heart is closed. The soil is not prepared. And no matter how desperately you wish to force growth, your effort is wasted. This is the silent pain of misjudging readiness. The sting of being dismissed, unheard, even ridiculed when what you offered was genuine. But the fault is not in the truth, it is in the timing. Marcus Aurelius warned himself not to waste energy trying to persuade the unwilling. He wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." The discipline is clear. Wisdom is not entertainment. It is not to be thrown casually into hands that cannot hold it. I once met a man who fell into this trap. He discovered philosophy, tasted inner calm for the first time, and it shook him awake. Overcome with excitement, he rushed to his friends, eager to pull them along. They mocked him, they rolled their eyes. They called his calm an act, a phase, a weakness. His spirit broke under their scorn, but in time he learned the deeper lesson. When he stopped preaching, when he simply lived the change, one of those same friends came to him quietly and asked, "What happened to you?" That question opened a door no argument ever could. Here lies a subtle arrogance we must guard against, the belief that it is our duty to awaken others. It is not. Awakening is personal. Seneca reminded us, "The sun also shines on the wicked, but it does not call them to virtue." You may speak with eloquence, but no words can land where there's no openness. You may want to shake people awake, to plead with them to rise, but until they are ready, your light will be a threat, not a gift. This is why silence is not abandonment, it is reverence. By keeping truth close, you are saying, "This is sacred, not casual talk for crowded tables. This is a key that unlocks doors, and I will not hand it to someone who insists on remaining locked inside." Instead, you live it. You let your example raise the question. You let your peace disturb their chaos, not by preaching, but by being. Think of it this way. People do not follow words. They follow energy. If you have truly absorbed something powerful, it will alter how you stand, how you move, how you choose. Your posture changes, your tone changes, your priorities shift. Others may not speak of it, but they will notice. And when the time is right, when curiosity replaces resistance, they will ask. Only then is the door ready to be unlocked. Consider the butterfly again. Its flight is not an invitation shouted to the caterpillar. Its very existence is proof. It says without saying, there is more, there is higher, there is another form of life. But the caterpillar must choose to break its own cocoon. That choice cannot be made for it. This is the resonance of lived truth. You live so deeply, so silently, that your very being becomes magnetic. Those meant to rise will feel the pull. They will not come to argue. They will not come to debate. They will come to learn. And those who resist, who cling to their shadows, let them. It is not your task to drag them into light. I recall a woman who understood this. She had endured years of chaos at home. When she found her stillness, she longed to save her family with it. But every attempt only deepened their resentment. Eventually, she stopped trying. She cultivated her peace quietly. Months later, her mother whispered, "You are different. Teach me." That moment carried more weight than years of pleading. So protect your treasure, guard your flame. Not everyone deserves the key, and not everyone wants it. Some will fight to remain in the dark because the light unmasks too much. Let them. Your task is not to convince, it is to embody. Here is where silence becomes a teacher sharper than words. Your calm under insult, your steadiness under pressure. Your refusal to waste yourself in arguments, these will preach louder than sermons. Presence will do what explanations cannot. And as this truth sinks in, remember, transformation spreads not by force, but by resonance. Live so fully that your life itself becomes the invitation. Let those who are ready come. Let those who resist stay behind, for your path is forward. From here, we step into the next lesson, how guarding your wisdom is not withholding, but preserving the strength that will carry you through storms without breaking. From here, let us step into the next chapter and hold this image in mind, a flame resting in the hollow of your chest, flickering but alive. You do not rush to show it. You guard it. You let it grow inside until it becomes steady enough to endure the winds outside. The world may not be ready, but you must be. For if you hand out your fire before your foundation is strong, others will smother it, and you risk being pulled back into the very shadows you escaped. Your truth may be real, but if it is still fragile, the wrong environment can crush it. This is the silent danger of sharing too soon. That is why silence must build your strength. In time, when the soil is ready, when the moment is ripe, others will hear you without you straining to be heard. Until then, you walk in peace, protecting what has not yet matured. Here's where a sharper lesson begins. Strength is the hand that strikes, but power is the hand that holds. Strength is the ability to act. Power is the discipline to refrain. Many misunderstand mastery. They confuse loudness with strength, dominance with control, and performance with presence. But true power, the kind that bends lives and alters futures, does not need to announce itself. It enters no room demanding recognition. It holds no hunger for proof. It is composed. It is quiet. Think of someone who has walked through fire, endured pain, faced their own weakness, and risen tempered. Their very presence carries weight, not because they shout, but because they no longer need to. They listen more than they speak. Their restraint teaches more than any lecture. When they finally do speak, their words strike like a hammer, not because they are loud, but because they are earned. This is restraint, and restraint is the crown of true power. Now imagine the opposite, a hall buzzing with voices, screens glowing, egos clashing, everyone desperate to be seen. Social gatherings, social media, even intimate spaces have become stages. Everyone's talking, few are listening, everyone's sharing, yet so little of it carries depth. It is all noise, and amidst that noise, the ones who carry real power are the quiet ones. Those who understand that wisdom is not a trophy to be displayed, it is a fire to be protected. Marcus Aurelius counseled himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice carefully, he did not call power the ability to command others, but the mastery of oneself. And mastery reveals itself not in what you do, but in what you choose not to do. The ability to allow someone else to be wrong without demanding correction. The courage to remain silent when provoked. The clarity to resist the craving to prove. That is not cowardice, that is command. I once knew a man who lived the other way, quick to anger, quick to argue, desperate to show his worth in every quarrel. He had strength, but no power. His energy scattered in endless conflict. Years later, life had humbled him, loss had burned away his arrogance, and when insult came, he smiled faintly and said nothing. His silence spoke louder than his old fury ever did. People treated him differently, not because he demanded respect, but because his presence carried weight. Here is the truth that cuts deep. The moment you feel the need to prove yourself, you have already surrendered your value into another's hands. That is not power. That is insecurity, dressed in the mask of confidence. Real power does not demand recognition. Real power stands unmoved until the right moment calls for action. So let your silence be your training ground. Resist the urge to scatter your wisdom. Guard your flame until it is strong enough to endure storms. Let restraint carve your posture, your voice, your decisions. The world may not understand, but they will feel it. And when they are ready, they will seek you out, not for your noise, but for your depth. This is where wisdom deepens, when you no longer chase recognition, when you no longer waste your fire in every quarrel, when you choose to hold rather than scatter. The Stoics called this the essence of mastery. To act with intention, not desperation. To live as though your truth is already whole. And so, let your silence sharpen you. Let it guard your strength until it becomes unshakable. For power is not what you show. Power is what you do not need to show. As this lesson settles, the path opens again toward the deeper discipline of stillness, where silence itself becomes both shield and sword, shaping not only how you live, but how you see. Entering the next chapter, imagine a fighter stepping into the ring. His shoulders are loose, his breath steady, his eyes calm. The crowd doubts him. He looks too relaxed, too unbothered. But beneath that quiet stance lies years of discipline, scars of defeat, lessons etched into his bones. When the time comes, his strike is not wild, not rushed. It is precise, devastating, final. His power is not in what he shows. His power is in what he withholds. There is a discipline in keeping truth within, in resisting the world's demand for constant display. Some things are not meant to be shouted. They are meant to be lived. When you discover something that changes the core of you, the first impulse may be to proclaim it, to scatter it wide. But wisdom is not performance. Wisdom is practice. It must be digested in silence, integrated into your choices, carved into your habits. Without that, what you have is not strength, only noise. Think of seasoned martial artists. The most dangerous ones are never those shouting in the corner, flexing for the crowd. The most dangerous ones are the quiet ones, relaxed, almost ordinary. They have no need to posture, no need to prove. Their restraint is not forced. It is natural, forged through repetition, through humiliating losses and costly victories. They have learned the essence. True power is not what you show. It is what you no longer need to show. And so it is with inner wisdom. The more you know yourself, the less you need the world to know you. The deeper your clarity, the less you hunger to argue. You stop wasting your energy in endless debates. You stop chasing applause. You even allow others to underestimate you, to misjudge you, to mock you, because your truth no longer needs their agreement. That is power, silent, anchored, unshakable. But restraint does more than protect. It sharpens. Each time you hold back when it would be easier to lash out, each time you choose presence instead of performance, you forge a blade within. You are training the inner warrior, not the reckless one who swings wildly at every provocation, but the precise one who acts only when the strike is necessary. Instead of scattering energy outward in speeches, you channel it inward to refine yourself. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Restraint frees you from that suffering. Each act of silence deepens awareness. You begin to see clearly who deserves your energy and who does not. You learn who is ready and who remains closed. You discern what is real and what is illusion. This clarity becomes a compass. It guides your steps with intention rather than impulse. I once knew a woman who lived this shift. In her youth, she argued constantly, colleagues, family, even strangers. She felt compelled to win every conversation, to prove her worth with words. But after years of exhaustion, she grew tired of the noise. She turned to stillness. Slowly, she stopped explaining herself. She let her silence hold what once required defense, and people noticed. They treated her with new respect, not because she demanded it, but because her restraint revealed strength. Her presence had shifted from reaction to deliberate expression. That is where transformation begins, when your life stops being a reflex to the world and becomes a deliberate expression of your truth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Restraint is the practice of this principle, to let others remain mistaken without disturbing your peace, to resist to the urge to correct every falsehood, to act and speak only when clarity demands it. Understand this: restraint is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is the highest form of control. It is the refusal to let the crowd dictate your voice. It is the discipline to wait for the right moment and to act with precision when it arrives. The moment you no longer react to every jab, you rise above. You stop being tossed like a boat in the storm of opinion. You become the shoreline itself, steady, immovable, unyielding. And in that stillness you discover a freedom deeper than applause, deeper than recognition. The freedom of not needing to prove anything at all. That is the mark of maturity. That is the strength Stoicism points us toward. Not strength of conquest, but strength of command over oneself. So guard your insight. Let it season in silence until it becomes natural. Train your restraint as if it were your sharpest weapon, because in truth, it is. And as this lesson closes, we step into another, how stillness itself reshapes the way others see you, often before you speak a single word. At this stage, imagine reaching a place inside yourself where peace is no longer negotiable. Storms may rage, insults may fly, circumstances may twist, but none of them move you from your center. You stand as if rooted in stone, and here is the remarkable thing: others feel it. They may not understand what changed. Some may even feel threatened by a calm they cannot disturb, but they feel it all the same. Slowly, their behavior shifts, not because you demanded respect, but because your restraint unsettled them, made them wonder, what does this person know that I don't? That question plants itself in their mind. It grows in silence, and eventually they treat you differently. Seneca once wrote, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." This is what they are sensing. You are no longer swayed by their storms. You have yourself, and that ownership radiates outward like unseen fire. I once knew a teacher who carried this aura. In meetings, others argued, shouted, fought to be heard. He often said nothing. He observed, listened, remained still. Some dismissed him as passive, but when he finally spoke, the room went silent. His words carried weight, not because of their volume, but because they were rare, born of patience, sharpened by restraint. He had learned what few understand. Silence itself is a form of speech. And this is where the journey turns sharper. There comes a moment in every path of growth when the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing. Not because you lack words, but because you have come to see that silence itself is a language older than arguments, older than defenses, older than explanations. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is mastery. Think back to the early days of your own awakening. You were overflowing. You wanted to share everything, to pour it into every ear, to shout it from rooftops. But time, the relentless teacher, revealed a harsh truth. Not everyone listens with the same depth. Not everyone is ready to receive what you labored so hard to discover, and not every space deserves your voice. That is when silence becomes a choice, not submission, not fear, but clarity. In silence, you begin to uncover your true motives. You ask yourself, am I speaking because I seek validation? Am I explaining because my ego demands to be right? Or can I remain quiet, protecting my energy, letting others be wrong without disturbing my balance? Silence cuts deeper than speech because it forces you to confront yourself. Stripped of justification, you meet the truth as it is, raw, unpolished, unshakable, and facing it without distraction is where real growth begins. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul. The world will rush, it will shout, it will perform, but you do not. You pause, you listen. You begin to notice not just words, but the silence between them. You see patterns others miss. You perceive motives hidden under tone and gesture. This sharpened perception is not a gift, it is awareness cultivated by design, built patiently, layer by layer, in silence. Picture the greatest martial artists. Their strength is not only in muscle but in patience. They observe, wait, and when they strike, it is precise, unstoppable. Their calm is their shield. Their stillness is their weapon. In the same way, your silence becomes your discipline. Your pause becomes your strike. Your restraint becomes your mastery. I once knew a woman who learned this after years of quarrels. She fought every slight, answered every insult. She was always exhausted, always wounded. Then, one day she stopped. She allowed others to be wrong. She let mockery pass by unanswered. At first, people mocked her more, but as time passed, they changed. They began to respect her steadiness. Her silence spoke louder than all her arguments had. What she once tried to force with words, she achieved with restraint. This is what it means to walk with quiet power. To let the storm break around you but not within you. To carry truth without scattering it in every conversation. To wait until the right moment arrives, and then to speak words that land with undeniable weight. If you have felt this strength before, write one word in the comments: silence. And if you walk this path, let it be known not by your noise, but by your presence. Because from here, another lesson unfolds, how silence not only shields your wisdom, but sharpens your vision, teaching you to see what others cannot. Moving into the next chapter, imagine a warrior at the edge of battle. His face is calm, his posture steady, his breath even. He does not rush forward with rage. He does not waste his energy in noise. He waits. He watches. And when his blade finally moves, it is not from anger, but from readiness. That strike is clean, precise, unstoppable. Life demands the same discipline. When you master the art of silence, you no longer speak to fill space. You speak because you have something worth giving. And when you choose to remain quiet, that quiet is not weakness. It is power, deliberate and sharp. Think of your relationships. Silence can heal more deeply than argument ever could. Sometimes the people you care about do not need your advice. They need your presence. Sometimes they do not need your voice. They need the chance to hear their own. When you stop interrupting their process with explanations, you give them something rare: room to breathe, room to think, room to grow. That silence is not abandonment. It is love. It shows trust that they are capable of walking their own path, just as you had to walk yours. And when it comes to your own pain, silence becomes sanctuary. You do not need to parade your wounds for them to be real. You do not need to narrate your healing for it to take place. The deepest repair often happens quietly. In the still hours when no one is watching, when you sit with yourself without distraction or opinion, you finally allow the pieces of your soul to return to one another. Not because you forced them, but because you gave them space. Silence does what words cannot. It lets the spirit settle. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Men seek retreats for themselves, in the country by the sea, in the hills. But nowhere can a man find a retreat more peaceful than in his own soul." That is the essence of silence. It becomes your inner retreat. A fortress you carry everywhere, and within that fortress, your vision is protected. The more you announce your dreams, your plans, your desires, the more you expose them to doubt, envy, and interference. But when you hold them close, in stillness, they root themselves deep. They grow stronger. They no longer feed on applause. They are nourished by purpose. Think of builders working underground. For months, even years, there is nothing to see. But beneath the earth, foundations are being laid stone by stone. Then, one day, walls rise, towers reach, and the world believes it happened suddenly. What they call sudden was only silence preparing its proof. So it must be with your own life. Let your success make the noise. Let your peace be the evidence. Yet silence is more than shelter. It is a teacher of patience. Life will provoke you. People will test you. Challenges will push you to react quickly, to defend, to shout. But silence holds you back. It trains you to pause, to observe, to wait until your response is anchored in strength instead of impulse. This does not mean you never speak. It means that when you do, your words land with weight. They have been tempered like steel in fire. Few but heavy, measured and undeniable. I recall a craftsman I once knew, a quiet man, often overlooked. In conversations, he rarely offered his opinion. People assumed he had nothing to add. But when a crisis struck, when things broke, when decisions mattered, all eyes turned to him. His words were calm, precise, unwavering. And because he had said little before, his voice carried authority when he finally spoke. People trusted him, not because of his volume, but because of his depth. His silence had already done the work. This is the secret so many miss. They think power must be loud. They believe wisdom must always be explained. They confuse noise with influence. But the Stoics remind us, real power is quiet. Real wisdom holds itself back until the moment is ripe. Epictetus taught, first learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak. He did not say speak often. He said speak with understanding, and understanding requires silence. So let silence be your ally. Let it protect your dreams until they are strong. Let it heal your wounds without spectacle. Let it steady you in storms, so that when you do speak, your words are not scattered like leaves in the wind, but anchored like stones in a river. Remember this, silence is not the absence of power. It is its purest form. And when you carry it well, your presence speaks before your tongue does. From here, the path turns again to show how silence, faithfully kept, does more than guard your peace. It becomes a mirror, exposing truths in others that they cannot hide, no matter how hard they try. Advancing to the next chapter, imagine a mountain at dusk. Its peak is covered in mist, its silence heavy, its presence undeniable. It does not shout to prove its height. It simply stands, and the world adjusts itself around its weight. This is the essence of truth when carried in silence. It does not need to be broadcast to be real. It exists fully, shaping everything near it without demand. Here's the mistake many fall into. They think a truth must be shouted to matter. They believe a revelation only has power if the world applauds it. But the ones who have walked further know differently. They know silence is not empty. It is full of strength, full of depth, full of presence. It guards your energy like armor. It becomes your boundary, your meditation, your unseen shield. So when you discover something profound, resist the hunger to announce it. Let it live in you. Let it reshape your habits. Let it change how you rise at dawn, how you face insult without trembling, how you walk away from what no longer deserves your presence. Because the world does not need more noise. What it needs are people strong enough to hold their discoveries quietly until their moment arrives. And when that moment comes, you will speak, but not to impress, not to collect praise. You will speak to illuminate. That is a different kind of voice, a different kind of weight. Until then, let silence be your teacher. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Notice, he did not say the quantity of your words. He understood what many never learn, that wisdom is not paved in speech, but carved in restraint. It is forged in the furnace of solitude, tested by stillness, matured in silence. I once met a woman who embodied this. She had endured betrayal, loss, and humiliation. In her younger years, she had fought to explain herself to everyone, defending her choices, justifying her wounds, begging to be understood. But as time tempered her, she stopped explaining. She no longer needed to convince anyone of her worth. She carried herself with a calm gravity that silenced even her harshest critics. When she finally spoke, her words struck deep, not because she was loud, but because her silence had already prepared the ground. This is the paradox. The one who shouts often convinces no one. The one who holds silence earns respect without asking. Power is not in the noise. Power is in the presence. And presence is built in the quiet moments when no one is watching. Think of the hours before sunrise, the world still asleep, the streets empty, the air sharp and cool. You sit with your own breath, your own thoughts, your own choices. There is no audience, no applause, just you. And it is in these hours that real becoming takes place. Not in the debates, not in the declarations, but in the stillness where you refine yourself like steel in a fire no one else can see. Here's the test. Can you allow your victories to remain unspoken? Can you let your healing unfold without performance? Can you walk forward without announcing your every step? Those who can pass this test discover something unshakable, a strength that does not depend on recognition, a dignity that does not shrink under ridicule, a peace that does not tremble under doubt. Seneca once wrote, "He who has peace of mind disturbs neither himself nor another. That is the fruit of silence." When you no longer chase recognition, you no longer disturb yourself with the need to be seen. And when you no longer seek to prove, you disturb no one else. You simply exist, steady, calm, magnetic. I recall a man who once told me, "When I was younger, I wanted to be heard everywhere. Now, I only want my presence to be felt where it matters." That is wisdom distilled. The younger self craves applause. The matured self seeks alignment. The wise self seeks nothing, only to live the truth without breaking it apart in words. Here lies the sharper truth. The deeper the wisdom, the less you will want to share it casually. Because truth is not a performance. Truth is earned. It is paid for in hours of doubt, in mistakes, in failures, in rising again when no one clapped for you. And anything that costly is too sacred to be wasted as chatter. So remember this. The one who no longer feels the need to be loud is the one who has found something permanent. That power does not sway with praise or collapse under criticism. It is rooted like a mountain unmoved by storms. It is steady like a flame that does not flicker in the wind. Guard your silence. Protect your discoveries. Let them reshape you fully before you ever offer them. And when you finally do speak, it will not be to prove. It will be to reveal. From here, the path leads deeper still to the final realization that silence, when honored, is not withholding from others, but preserving the sanctity of what was carved into you through fire and time. Advancing into the next chapter, imagine yourself carrying a vessel of clear water across uneven ground. Every step matters. You do not move slowly out of fear, but out of respect for the weight you carry. This is what wisdom feels like once it has entered you. It is not a jewel to display, but a current that reshapes your life from within. Before it can flow outward to others, it must first cleanse you. The mistake many make is to treat insight like performance. They rush to speak it, to display it, to prove they have found something rare. But wisdom is not decoration. It is transformation. And before it transforms anyone else, it must soften you, sharpen you, reorder you. You carry it within until it alters the very fabric of how you move through the world. Think of anger. Once, the smallest insult could have stirred a storm within you, but now wisdom whispers restraint. Your words no longer lash out so easily. Your focus sharpens. Your ego grows quieter. What once demanded reaction now meets silence. That silence is not emptiness. It is a compass. It directs you even in the darkest terrain, even when the world shouts for you to lose yourself. This is the peace that Stoicism teaches, not the peace that comes from life running smoothly, but the peace that endures even when everything around you fractures. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. And once you do, your life begins to shift. Not because the world has changed, but because you have." That shift is subtle. At first, barely noticeable, but over time, it becomes undeniable. You walk differently, you speak differently, you decide differently. Not from desperation, but from clarity. You spend your energy wisely, you protect your silence fiercely. What once drained you now passes by without claim. What once provoked you now dissolves before your calm. I once knew a man who had lived most of his years in conflict. Every slight became a battlefield. Every challenge demanded a response. He aged quickly, not from years, but from constant quarrels. One day, after great loss, he chose differently. He stopped defending himself. He stopped feeding noise with more noise. He grew still. At first, they mocked his quiet. They called him weak. But in time, his silence gained weight. They noticed how storms seemed to break around him, but not within him. And slowly, respect followed. Not because he demanded it, but because he no longer needed it. His presence had become proof. Here lies the truth many resist. Not every discovery must be spoken. Some truths belong only to you. The world will tempt you with applause, with arguments, with recognition. It will try to pull you back into chaos, to make you waste your strength on convincing. But remember, your task is not to be loud. Your task is to be clear, to be anchored, to be real. And sometimes the most real act is silence. Seneca said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Delay is silence in motion, to pause instead of react, to hold your energy sacred instead of scattering it into conflict. This is not weakness. This is mastery. For the strongest are not those who fight every battle, but those who choose the battles worthy of their strength." Notice what happens when silence becomes your shield. You no longer let noise invade your heart. You no longer let confusion dictate your path. Stillness enters you, and in that stillness, strength begins to grow roots, deep, unshakable. People sense it before they can name it. They feel drawn to it, even unsettled by it. Your calm becomes a mirror. Their chaos reflects back at them, and they cannot ignore it. This is why the one who has learned to hold truth without display is untouchable. They influence without forcing. They command respect without asking. They no longer need to raise their voice because their presence carries weight that words cannot add to. They have become steady, anchored, immovable, like a mountain unmoved by storms, like a flame that does not flicker in the wind. I recall another story, a teacher who spoke rarely in crowded rooms. He listened as others argued, interrupted, filled the air with words. He waited, and when he finally spoke, the room fell silent. His words carried more weight than all the noise before them. Why? Because he had respected the truth he carried. He did not throw it into the air recklessly. He waited for the moment when it mattered. This is what silence teaches, that not every truth requires a witness, that not every insight must be displayed, that what is sacred must first shape you fully before it can shape others. And when you finally do speak, your words cut deep, not because they are many, but because they are necessary. So let your life become the proof. Let your choices echo the lessons you have earned. Let your restraint reveal the strength within you. Do not waste yourself in the market of noise. Guard your silence as you would guard treasure. For treasure is exactly what it is, the sum of your pain, your failures, your quiet perseverance. And here lies the paradox. The deeper your wisdom, the less you need to speak. The more you embody it, the less you crave validation. For silence is not absence. Silence is the highest expression of truth. And as this realization settles, another unfolds. The recognition that silence itself sharpens vision, exposing not only your own clarity, but also the hidden intentions of those around you. That is the ground we now step toward. What begins in restraint eventually matures into presence. You hold your silence, you let it shape you, and slowly the world starts to respond. Not with applause, not with quick understanding, but with a quiet recognition that something about you has changed. The stillness you walked has become the ground beneath your feet. But stillness is never the end. For once silence has settled in your bones, the next test emerges. How to carry that weight into the open, how to let your life speak without wasting a word. Here, strength turns outward, not as noise, but as gravity. And it is here that we step further, into the truths that show how lived wisdom transforms not only your path, but the way others move around you. Entering a new chapter, imagine a seed buried in the earth, hidden from sight. It is not celebrated, not applauded, not even noticed. Yet in the silence of soil, something invisible takes place. Roots push down, life gathers strength where no eye can see. This is how wisdom works. When guarded in silence, it shapes you quietly, long before the world sees evidence of your change. The early signs of transformation are small. The way you wake up with a steadier rhythm. The way you pause to listen instead of interrupting. The way you walk away from what once consumed your time and dignity. These are not dramatic gestures. They are subtle shifts, yet they are undeniable. People may not be able to name what has changed, but they will feel it. A new weight settles in your presence, like gravity no one can ignore. Marcus Aurelius once urged himself, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." The lesson is simple. The world does not need your explanations. It needs your embodiment. When you live the truth rather than narrate it, your very presence becomes a testimony stronger than any argument. I once met a woman who had carried years of chaos within her. Anger, disappointment, broken trust. It lived in every word she spoke. One day she decided to stop explaining herself. She stopped trying to justify every choice. She turned inward, silent but steady, and began to change. Her family noticed. Her colleagues noticed. Not because she shouted her growth, but because her silence carried a weight her words never did. In time they came to her, not to debate, but to ask. Her life had become the lesson. Here is where silence becomes your soil. Every time you resist the urge to explain, you are watering the seed. Every time you choose stillness over noise, you are deepening the roots. And once those roots have taken hold, no storm can rip them out. You cannot fake this. Pretended calm collapses under pressure. But true stillness, earned in solitude, radiates. There is also a painful truth. Not everyone is ready for what you have discovered. Not everyone has the eyes to see what you now see, or the heart to carry what you have learned. The temptation is strong to hand them your treasure, to show them the map you found. But treasure given to the unready becomes a burden. Maps given to those unwilling to travel become meaningless lines. Picture entering a cave where voices echo endlessly. You bring a single lantern, but instead of gratitude, the echoes turn against you. Not because the light is false, but because it interrupts the rhythm they have grown used to. You believe you are helping, but to them, you are a threat. They are not angry because your light is false. They are angry because it unsettles the world they have built around their sleep. This is why patience is part of wisdom. A truth delivered too early is no better than a lie. Epictetus taught, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. It is a reminder that revelation must be lived before it can be spoken. Until it is part of your character, it is only thought. And thoughts can be crushed by ridicule, dismissed by mockery, bent by doubt. But once lived, truth becomes unshakable. I once knew a scholar who thought reading one book made him wise. He rushed to lecture others, but when pressed with real life, his knowledge dissolved. His failure was not in reading, but in speaking before he had lived. He had battled rage for years, destroying every bond he touched. One morning he woke with calm, unlike anything he had known. He believed he was healed. He rushed to announce his new wisdom. When challenged, the old rage returned, fiercer than ever. His listeners laughed, and his fragile insight shattered. His mistake was not seeing the truth, but failing to let silence ground it. That is why restraint is protection. Silence is not withholding, it is cultivation. It is giving your discovery time to ripen until it becomes undeniable. When you finally speak, it is no longer to prove. It is simply to reveal what already is. And once you reach this stage, something remarkable happens. You no longer crave agreement. You no longer need applause. Your peace stops being negotiable. You stop explaining to those determined not to understand. You let your calm disturb their chaos without saying a word. And when they finally ask, you will know they are ready. Seneca wrote, "Things that were hard to bear are sweet to remember. What feels heavy now, your silence, your restraint, becomes sweetness later when your strength speaks for itself. Presence becomes your voice. Dignity becomes your language. Stillness becomes your shield. So hold your seed in silence until it grows roots no storm can tear out. Protect your ground until your truth is no longer fragile. And when it finally breaks the surface, it will stand tall, not because you forced it, but because it was ready. From here, the path leads us deeper into the lesson of why forcing wisdom upon others only weakens it, and how true influence spreads not by argument, but by resonance. Moving into the next chapter, imagine a room where everyone has been asleep for years. Their eyes have grown used to the dark, their comfort tied to silence. Then suddenly, a door bursts open and light floods in. You think you are doing them a favor. You believe clarity will be welcomed. But to them, your light is a threat. It tears at the fragile peace they have built on illusion. They shield their eyes. They resist. Some will even attack you for daring to disturb their rest. This is the nature of truth. It disrupts. It doesn't soothe at first. It unsettles. It shakes. It strips away illusions people have clung to for survival. That is why Marcus Aurelius warned himself not to expect the world to embrace virtue quickly. What comforts you will frighten another. What liberates you may look like chains to someone else. And here lies the discipline to carry truth without rushing to impose it. I recall a man who, after years of wandering lost in anger, finally tasted a calm morning. He woke before sunrise, sat by the window, and for the first time in his adult life, felt free from the grip of rage. His instinct was to run to those he loved, to explain, to convert. He spoke endlessly of serenity, of restraint, of this newfound light. But they laughed. They dismissed him. They mocked his past failures. And slowly, their doubt corroded his fragile peace. His breakthrough had been real, but it had not yet hardened. He mistook awakening for mastery, and he paid the price. Seneca once wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance. Wisdom does not arrive whole. It matures in silence, tested by action." That is why when you push revelation on those unready, you risk not only their rejection, but the unraveling of your own progress. To speak too soon is like planting a seed in barren soil. The seed itself is potent, but the ground cannot hold it. You end up exhausted, unseen, unheard, and you confuse their rejection with proof that your truth was false. But it wasn't false. It was premature. Here is where the ego deceives us. It whispers that we must share to be generous, that if we have found clarity, we owe it to the world to announce it. But the wise understand, generosity without timing becomes harm. A tree does not demand that its fruit be eaten while still green. It waits for ripeness, knowing unripe fruit makes the stomach sick. In the same way, your truth must mature in you before it can nourish anyone else. Think about the difference between noise and presence. A man who shouts of his growth convinces no one. A man who lives it in silence compels without words. You feel it in how he carries himself. You see it in how he does not waste energy on trivial battles. His calm under pressure says more than speeches. His refusal to be provoked carries more weight than any defense. That is mastery. That is how wisdom reveals itself, through embodiment, not through explanation. But this restraint requires courage, because silence is uncomfortable. It forces you to sit with your own motives. Why do you feel the need to speak? Is it to help or to be praised for helping? Is it to guide or to be seen as the one with answers? Silence burns away those illusions. It exposes whether you are serving truth or serving ego. And when you pass through that fire, what remains is pure. I once met a woman who carried herself with a gravity no words could match. She did not preach her beliefs. She did not argue about her principles. But her presence changed the rooms she entered. People found themselves speaking more carefully around her, listening more deeply, even without knowing why. In time, when they asked what gave her such calm, she spoke, but only then. And because she had waited, her words landed like stone, steady and undeniable. This is the discipline of silence, to protect your clarity until it becomes unshakable, to wait until your truth can withstand laughter, doubt, dismissal, to remember that timing matters. A truth spoken at the wrong time is no better than a lie. Epictetus warned, "First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Not speak it, do it." Only when your life has become the evidence does your voice gain the gravity of truth. So let your silence be the forge. Let it temper your steel before you carry it into battle. Let your life become the testimony long before your lips form the words. And when the right time comes, when someone approaches not with resistance, but with openness, your truth will not need to persuade. It will simply reveal what already is. Here lies the paradox. The more deeply you live your wisdom, the less urgent the need to speak. And when you do speak, your words will be few, but they will strike like iron, because they have been tempered in silence. And as this lesson settles, another question arises. How do you bear the weight of knowing something others cannot yet accept, especially when those you love are the ones still clinging to the dark? That is where our path turns next. Advancing to the next chapter, imagine entering a crowded hall lit only by dim lamps. People sit comfortably in the shadows, their eyes adjusted, their peace dependent on the half-light. Then you arrive with a torch, eager to show them what you have found. You believe you are giving them a gift. But the sudden brightness blinds them. They cry out, cover their faces, and turn against you, not because your light is false, but because it unsettles the world they have built around their darkness. This is the nature of wisdom. It does not flatter. It disturbs. It pushes against illusions carefully woven to keep fear at bay. Marcus Aurelius warned himself that truth rarely arrives to applause. It often appears first as an enemy, stripping away comfort and tearing at false certainties. The question is not whether truth is beautiful, but whether one is ready to see it. I once knew a man who tried to awaken his friends too soon. After years of self-destruction, he discovered discipline. He rose early, studied, trained, and slowly regained control of his life. The joy was overwhelming, and he rushed to share it. He preached order to those still trapped in chaos. But they laughed. They dismissed his progress. They dragged him back into the habits he had just escaped. Not because they wanted his ruin, but because his growth reminded them of their stagnation. His mistake was not in changing. It was in believing others would welcome the mirror his life held up to them. Seneca once said, "Associate with those who will make a better man of you." Yet the opposite also holds. When you reveal too much to those unwilling, they will pull you down, not rise with you. This is not malice, it is fear. Your clarity threatens their comfort. Your discipline exposes their excuses. And until they choose to see, they will resist. Here lies the hidden arrogance of awakening, the belief that it is your task to drag others into the light. But no one can be carried into wisdom. Each must walk alone. A butterfly does not return to its cocoon to rescue the caterpillar. Flight cannot be given as a gift. It must be lived through. Think of the seed cast upon stone. It carries forests within it, yet nothing grows. Not because the seed is weak, but because the ground is not ready. In the same way, your words, however true, fall flat when spoken to those who have not prepared their hearts to receive them. The rejection you feel is not of the truth itself, but of timing. This is why silence is not abandonment, it is reverence. To remain silent is to honor what is sacred. To say, this is not entertainment. This is not a casual tale for idle ears. This is a key, and I will not waste it in doors still locked from within. In this way, silence becomes the companion of wisdom, guarding it until the ground is fertile. I once met a woman who understood this. She had endured grief, rebuilt her life, and carried a peace so steady it unsettled those around her. Yet she never preached. She never demanded others change. She simply lived differently. In time, her presence created questions. People who once dismissed her now leaned closer, asking, "What happened to you?" And when she finally spoke, her words landed, not because they were louder than before, but because she had waited until others were ready to listen. This is the power of quiet example, to live so fully in alignment with what you know that your life itself becomes the invitation. To let your composure disturb chaos, to let your calm become a mirror in which others see their unrest. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. In doing so, he revealed what words cannot. Understand this. People do not follow arguments. They follow presence. They are drawn not to lectures, but to energy. A person who has mastered themselves radiates something unspoken. They do not need to persuade, for their very being persuades. This is why the greatest influence often belongs to those who speak the least. And so, let your silence be your shield. Let your way of living speak in places where words would only fail. Protect your treasure until those around you are ready, until their own hunger compels them to ask. When that moment arrives, your words will not need to convince. They will simply confirm what your life has already made clear. This is the discipline of patience, not withholding from others, but preserving strength until it can be offered without waste. And as this truth settles, we move toward another test, the challenge of carrying wisdom quietly when even those you love are not yet ready to hear it. From here, let us step into the next chapter and hold this image. A butterfly hovering in the morning light, wings trembling with quiet strength. It does not return to the branch to tug at the caterpillar. It does not lecture the cocoon. It flies because it has lived through its own struggle. And by flying, it shows what is possible. Transformation cannot be handed down. It must be endured. Now imagine scattering seeds across a slab of stone. Each seed is alive with the power to become a forest. Yet nothing grows. You water them. You shield them. Still, nothing. The problem is not the seed, it is the ground. So it is with truth. However brilliant the insight, however sacred the wisdom, it will not take root in soil that is not ready. When you insist on forcing it, you drain yourself. You end up unseen, unheard, even mocked. The pain you feel is not because what you carried was false, but because the one before you was not prepared to hold it. This is where subtle arrogance creeps in, the hidden belief that it is your duty to awaken others. But awakening is personal. It cannot be shouted into existence. Seneca reminded us, the sun also shines on the wicked, but it does not call them to virtue. Light is offered, not imposed. Your words may be true, your insight sharp, but unless the heart is open, nothing will land. You may ache to shake them, to plead with them, to show them the path. But until they are ready, your urgency will be twisted, your sincerity dismissed, your gift returned to you as scorn. That is why silence becomes wisdom's ally. To stay quiet is not to abandon truth. It is to honor it. It is to say, this is sacred. This is not for casual conversation. This is not for display. This is a key, and I will not hand it to one who still prefers to remain locked inside. In choosing silence, you protect what is holy from being treated as entertainment. But silence is not passivity. It is redirection. Instead of throwing words against closed doors, you let your life become the invitation. Your composure becomes the sermon. Your peace unsettles chaos. Your discipline exposes indulgence without a single word spoken. Marcus Aurelius urged himself, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." And in being, he preached louder than arguments ever could. I once knew a man who tried to save his friends with speeches. He filled every moment with philosophy, with exhortation, with demands that they change. They mocked him. They grew hostile. They resisted harder. But when he stopped talking and started living with calm, something shifted. He rose early. He worked diligently. He grew kinder. He argued less. At first they ignored him, but then curiosity began to gnaw at them. One day, one of the same friends who had mocked him asked quietly, "What happened to you?" That was the beginning, not because of his words, but because of his presence. This is how transformation spreads, not through force, but through resonance. When you live your truth deeply enough, it radiates. It becomes magnetic. Those who are meant to rise will feel the pull. They will not come to debate. They will not come to argue. They will come to learn. And when they do, you will not be convincing them. You will only be revealing what has already been carved into your way of life. So protect your treasure. Guard it with care. Not everyone wants the key. Some prefer the comfort of their chains. Some will fight to remain in darkness because light reveals too much. That is not your burden to carry. Your burden is to hold your flame steady, to embody clarity until it glows through your actions. Remember this: people follow energy, not words. They are moved by the weight of presence, not the noise of persuasion. They look at the one who has walked through storms and returned with eyes unclouded, who has carried loss, yet stands composed. They may not understand what they see, but they cannot ignore it. That is what awakens. That is what inspires. So live in such a way that your peace becomes a question others cannot escape. Let your silence disturb their chaos. Let your restraint expose their excess. When they are ready, they will ask, and only then is the door prepared to be unlocked. And as this understanding deepens, another lesson rises: the art of holding your truth, not only in silence but in strength, until it becomes unshakable, no matter who doubts, who mocks, or who resists. Let's step into the next chapter and picture this: a flame resting deep in the hollow of your chest. It flickers, alive but fragile, sheltered by your own ribs. You do not parade it before the wind. You do not rush to prove its glow. You guard it in silence until it becomes steady enough to endure storms. The world may not be ready, but you must be. For if you try to share too soon, the wrong breath can smother it. And worse, the wrong company can pull you back into the shadows you fought so hard to escape. Here lies the quiet danger of haste. Your truth may be real, but if it is still tender, it can be crushed. That is why restraint is strength. You hold it close, you let silence build its walls around it, and you walk your path in peace until the time is ripe. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Craving recognition is poverty of the soul. Protect your truth until it matures, until it no longer depends on applause. Now here's where a deeper distinction appears: strength and power. Strength is the ability to act. Power is the discipline not to. This is where most falter. They mistake loudness for might, dominance for control, performance for presence. But real power is quiet. It does not enter rooms demanding attention. It does not need to. It already knows what it is. I once met a soldier who had walked through loss, fear, and failure. He carried scars not on his skin, but in his silence. He did not rush to prove himself. He listened more than he spoke. When he finally opened his mouth, his words cut like iron, not because they were loud, but because they were earned. That is restraint. That is power mastered rather than displayed. Contrast this with the world we live in now. Noise everywhere. Crowded halls, screens glowing, voices fighting to be noticed. Everyone performs, few listen, everyone shares, few embody. It is all clamor. And in the midst of this noise, those who carry true power are the ones who hold back. They understand that wisdom is not a trophy for display. It is a fire to be protected. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He was not calling attention power. He was calling mastery power. And mastery reveals itself in restraint, in letting others be wrong without needing to correct them, in staying still when provoked, in choosing silence when the ego begs for noise. That is not cowardice. That is clarity. I recall another man, younger this time, quick to anger. Every insult drew a reaction. Every slight dragged him into conflict. He burned himself out, defending a self that did not need defending. Years later, after grief humbled him, I saw him again. When insulted, he only smiled faintly, saying nothing. His silence was not weakness. It was a blade sharper than any retort. People began treating him differently, not because he demanded respect, but because his restraint commanded it. Here is the truth that cuts. The moment you feel the need to prove yourself, you have already surrendered your worth into another's hands. That is not power. That is insecurity wearing a mask. Real power does not clamor. Real power does not explain. It waits. It holds. It strikes only when the strike is necessary. So let your silence be your training ground. Resist the urge to scatter your wisdom like cheap coins. Guard your flame until it no longer trembles. Let restraint shape your posture, your voice, your choices. The world may not understand at first, but it will feel it. And when the time comes, they will approach, not because of your noise, but because of your gravity. This is the paradox of quiet mastery. To do less, but mean more. To say little, but carry weight. To be underestimated, and yet unshakable. Restraint is not emptiness. It is precision. It is the art of holding power without wasting it. And as this lesson closes, another rises before us. The realization that silence not only protects what is sacred, but sharpens it, training you into a clarity that can cut through any illusion. Advancing to the next chapter, imagine this. A fighter standing in the ring before the first strike is thrown. His stance is calm, his breathing steady, his eyes unshaken. The crowd expects tension, noise, a display of aggression, but he waits. He does not reveal his strength. He withholds, and that restraint, more than any shout or gesture, unsettles those who face him. For the true danger is not in what you see, it is in what you cannot. So it is with wisdom. The discipline of silence is not about hiding, it is about grounding. Some truths are too deep to be announced in haste. They must first settle in your bones, shaping your habits, guiding your choices, turning theory into lived reality. Only then can they withstand the weight of being spoken. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "If it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it." Silence is the training ground for both. Now imagine a craftsman. His tools are sharp, but he does not flaunt them. He measures twice, cuts once, and lets the finished work speak for him. Wisdom works the same way. When you first uncover it, you feel the urge to display it, to announce, to prove. Yet restraint sharpens both the tool and the hand. By waiting, by holding, you refine not just the truths, but yourself. I once knew a woman who fought every conversation like a battle. Every disagreement became a chance to prove her worth. She wasted herself in arguments that left her drained but unfulfilled. Years later, after hardship carved her down to essentials, she grew quiet. She stopped explaining. She stopped chasing the need to be right. People noticed. Her silence unsettled some, but intrigued many. And when she did speak, her words carried a gravity that no argument could match. This is where silence transforms from shield into blade. Not a weapon of aggression, but of precision. Every moment you hold back, you train clarity. Every pause refines your aim. Instead of scattering your energy outward, you gather it inward. Instead of feeding noise, you feed depth. Seneca said it plainly, "It is better to be silent than to speak ill." To speak before wisdom has matured is to harm both yourself and those who hear you. But to wait, to guard, to measure, this is mastery. Consider too how silence exposes illusions. A man eager to argue reveals his insecurity. A woman rushing to prove her insight exposes its fragility. But the one who holds steady, who does not need to announce, commands without demanding. Presence becomes enough. And presence is earned only in the stillness where truth roots itself. The test is not in knowing when to speak. The test is in knowing when not to. To walk away from quarrels that do not deserve your breath. To allow others to remain mistaken without disturbing your peace. To choose calm when provoked. These are not acts of weakness. They are acts of control. The kind Epictetus meant when he said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." I recall an elder teacher, quiet in every gathering. While others clamored for attention, he listened. He observed. Some dismissed him as passive. But when the crucial moment arrived, when confusion reached its height, his voice cut through like a bell. Few words, measured, firm, and all fell silent. That is the fruit of discipline, the weight of speech born from the patience of silence. Here is the paradox. Silence looks empty to the untrained eye, but it is full of energy, of clarity, of restrained strength. Those who rush mistake it for absence, but in truth, it is presence of the highest kind. And when at last it is broken, when words finally rise, they carry a force that cannot be ignored. So guard your silence. Let it sharpen you. Let it strip away the need for applause and the craving for recognition. Train your restraint as if it were your greatest weapon, because it is. And remember, the greatest victories are not shouted, they are lived. From this ground, another step awaits, the realization that silence not only protects and sharpens, but also changes how the world itself responds to you long before you say a single word. From here, imagine this. A man walking into a crowded room where voices collide, each one fighting to be the loudest. He does not compete. He does not strain to match their volume. He simply sits, steady, his silence creating more presence than their shouts combined. Slowly, the room bends toward him. Eyes shift, conversations falter. Without a word, he has commanded attention. This is the paradox of quiet strength. It draws without chasing. It influences without asking. Here's where Stoicism shows its edge. Seneca wrote, "Silence is a lesson learned from the many sufferings of life." True silence is not just an absence of noise, it is the maturity earned after battles with pride, fear, and ego. It carries the weight of scars, the patience of restraint, and the clarity of one who no longer wastes himself. In a world desperate for reaction, silence becomes rare, and rarity always commands value. Think of how water shapes stone, not with force, not with noise, but with persistence. Drop after drop, it reshapes mountains. In the same way, silence reshapes perception. Those who once underestimated you start to wonder. Those who mocked your quiet now sense its gravity. And those who thought they could control you begin to feel their grip loosen. Influence grows, not from the volume of your words, but from the weight of your composure. I once met a leader who lived this truth. In heated debates, while others argued themselves breathless, he would listen, he would watch. His silence unsettled the loudest voices, and when he finally spoke, his words landed like stones in still water, creating ripples that no one could ignore. His power was not in how often he spoke, but in how deeply he made silence work for him. This is why silence is never emptiness. It is a mirror. When you refuse to fill space with noise, others are forced to confront themselves. Some grow uncomfortable, some grow curious, but none remain unaffected. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy," and silence is precisely that revenge. When provoked, you do not descend. You do not mirror the chaos. You stay above it, and by doing so, you expose its futility. At this stage, ask yourself, how much of your life has been wasted proving what didn't need proof? How many words were spilled defending what silence would have protected? Every unnecessary defense spends energy that could have been invested in growth. The discipline is this: to stop leaking your power into explanations and to start letting your life be the evidence. I recall a young man who once argued with everyone, friends, family, strangers online. He believed his words could force respect. But the more he spoke, the less people listened. Only after years of disappointment did he learn restraint. He stopped trying to correct every insult. He stopped debating those determined to misunderstand him. His quiet unsettled more than his speeches ever did. In time, even those who scorned him began to respect his steadiness. His silence taught what his noise never could. And here lies the truth that cuts deep. Silence is not passive. It is an active choice. It is self-command. It is refusing to let the world pull you into battles that drain but never build. When you no longer leap at every challenge, you become untouchable. You choose your ground. You choose your moment. And when you act, it is precise, measured, unshakable. That is what real power looks like. So let your silence do the work. Let it guard your energy, unsettle your critics, and elevate your presence. Speak less, and when you do, let it matter. Protect your calm like a fortress, and watch how the world begins to bend toward it. If you feel this truth, write just one word in the comments: silent. And if these words resonate, subscribe so you do not miss the next steps on this path. Because what comes next is even sharper, the moment when silence does more than protect and command. It becomes revelation, exposing not only your strength, but the hidden truth of others, whether they wish it or not. Advancing to the next chapter, picture this: a mirror standing in the middle of a crowded square. People pass by and glance at it, but most turn away quickly, unsettled. Why? Because the mirror does not flatter. It does not soften edges or bend the truth. It reflects exactly what stands before it. This is what silence becomes once you have embodied it fully. It stops being only your protection and starts becoming revelation. Without speaking, you begin to expose the truth in others, not by force, but by reflection. Now imagine sitting across from someone who thrives on chaos. They bait you with sharp words, expecting fire in return. Instead, you remain still, composed, silent. At first, they laugh, they push harder, but the longer your calm holds, the more restless they grow. Their own intentions, once hidden, begin to show. Your silence acts like a clear surface. They see themselves, and they do not like it. This is the power of restraint. It does not only guard your peace, it forces others to confront their own storms. Epictetus once taught, "If someone is mistaken, instruct them kindly. But if they resist, blame yourself for trying." Silence lives at the heart of this wisdom. When you stop arguing, you reveal more than words ever could. The fool unmasks himself by his persistence. The deceitful unravel in their own noise, and those with integrity recognize in your quiet strength the presence of something higher than defense. I once knew a woman who practiced this without knowing its name. In her workplace, colleagues often tried to provoke her, competing for recognition, spreading whispers. Instead of matching their noise, she worked in quiet focus. She never defended herself in meetings, never fueled rumors with counter-rumors. Over time, the contrast became impossible to ignore. Those who gossiped revealed themselves as shallow. She became the one people trusted, not because she shouted her innocence, but because her silence made their malice visible. Her restraint became a mirror, and in that mirror, truth was undeniable. Here's where the lesson cuts deeper. Silence is not passive. It is active revelation. It strips away illusions, exposing what people would rather keep hidden. A liar depends on noise, on confusion, on clutter. Take away the noise, and their dishonesty hangs naked. An insecure man survives by dragging others into argument. Refuse the bait, and his weakness shows in plain sight. You do not have to announce their flaws. You simply let your stillness reflect them back. Seneca reminded us, "He who does not prevent a wrong when he can, commands it to be done." Many misunderstand this to mean you must always speak. But sometimes the strongest prevention is silence itself, the refusal to join in corruption, the quiet withdrawal from falsehood, the calm that turns chaos back onto itself. By not playing the game, you expose the game for what it is. At this stage, think of silence as a blade sharper than speech. A word may cut once, but silence can cut forever because it lingers. People replay it in their minds. They fill the gap with their own conscience. Your absence of defense unsettles them more than 1,000 explanations, and in that discomfort, truth surfaces. There was once a mentor who taught his students this art. When accused falsely, he never defended himself. He would listen, nod, and say nothing. His students grew anxious for him. "Why won't you speak?" they asked. He replied, "Because falsehood dies faster when it is starved." And indeed, each time the lies fell apart under their own weight. His silence proved heavier than arguments. So understand this. Silence is not withdrawal. It is strategy. It is the revelation of truth without the waste of battle. The Stoics knew that the highest form of strength is not in conquering others, but in conquering yourself. And once you command yourself, your very presence becomes a test others cannot pass. Here is the paradox. People will call you mysterious, intimidating, even cold. But it is not you they fear. It is their own reflection in your calm. They sense their pretenses cracking. They feel their noise losing ground. And though they may never admit it, your silence teaches them more than your words ever could. So let your stillness do the unveiling. Let it strip the masks from those who hide behind volume. Let it expose intentions without a single accusation. Your silence is not emptiness. It is a mirror, polished by discipline, reflecting truth without distortion. And as this mirror grows clearer, the journey turns again toward the realization that silence does not merely reveal what is false. It also magnifies what is real, drawing the right people, the right paths, the right future closer to you without effort, without demand, without a single wasted word. From here, let us step into the next chapter, where silence no longer acts only as a mirror to reveal, but as a magnet that draws. Picture this: a fire burning steadily in the darkness. No wind, no shouting, no sparks leaping outward. Yet those lost in the night walk toward it, compelled not by noise, but by warmth. This is the way true presence works when silence has matured. It attracts without reaching. It influences without demanding. Now imagine a gathering where everyone competes to be seen. Voices rise, gestures grow larger, the air thick with performance. But then one figure enters quietly. No grand entrance, no need for attention. Yet within minutes, eyes turn. Conversations falter. Why? Because gravity does not shout. It pulls. And silence, carried with depth, has its own gravity. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Consider what this means in practice. To remain calm when provoked, steady when others waver, content when others scramble, it unsettles the noisy world around you. People sense there is something they cannot touch. Your restraint becomes not absence, but authority. I recall a man who lived this truth without intention. He had endured betrayal, and instead of retaliating, he retreated into stillness. He worked quietly, spoke little, and carried himself with calm certainty. At first, those who wronged him mocked his silence, believing it weakness. But as time passed, others noticed his steadiness. They sought his counsel. They trusted his presence. The mockers faded, but his quiet influence grew. Without seeking followers, he gained them, not because of performance, but because his silence revealed a strength they lacked. Here's where the paradox deepens. The less you speak of your worth, the more others begin to feel it. The less you strive for validation, the more people sense your value. In a world hungry for recognition, indifference to recognition is power. You become untouchable precisely because you do not chase what others are enslaved by. Think of a tree standing in a crowded square. It does not call attention to itself. It does not plead for admiration. Yet in its shade, people gather. Beneath its branches, they find rest. That is the essence of quiet presence. It offers without announcing. It commands without imposing. It holds because it is rooted deep. Seneca warned, "He who seeks wisdom is already wise, but he who believes he has found it is a fool." The one who boasts of his transformation still wavers. The one who embodies it silently carries something others cannot deny. Influence built on words fades when words are forgotten. Influence built on presence endures long after the voice is silent. At this stage, silence becomes more than personal discipline. It becomes a force that shapes the world around you. In conflicts, your refusal to react can dissolve the fire of anger. In gatherings, your listening can command more attention than endless speeches. In love, your patience can speak louder than dramatic gestures. And in leadership, your calm steadiness can hold a group together when everything else threatens to scatter. But take note, this kind of power cannot be faked. Those who imitate silence for effect are soon exposed, because true stillness is not performance, it is lived truth. It shows in your eyes, in your breath, in the way you carry yourself when no one is watching. Only silence born of discipline, trial, and acceptance carries weight. So let your silence draw, not push. Let your presence speak where words would be wasted. Let your restraint unsettle the shallow and comfort the sincere. Influence gained without noise cannot be taken away by noise. It is yours because it rests not on approval, but on mastery. And as this truth settles, the path ahead opens further, not only into how silence attracts, but into how it transforms conflict itself, turning even the attacks of others into opportunities to display the strength that no storm can shake. Advancing to the next chapter, imagine holding a vessel of pure water in your hands. You walk carefully, steadying each step, not out of fear of spilling, but out of reverence for what you carry. This is how wisdom must be held, not flaunted, not poured out carelessly, but honored. For its first task is not to impress others, but to transform you. Think of how often people rush to display their knowledge, scattering it like coins in the marketplace. They seek recognition, applause, validation. Yet the Stoics warned against this hunger. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "Be content with what you are and wish not to be otherwise." To live the lesson is far greater than to speak it. To embody truth is power. To announce it without living it is vanity. So you keep it within. You let it shape the way you rise each morning. You let it soften the sting of insult, sharpen your focus when distraction tempts you, and quiet the voice of ego when pride begs to be seen. Slowly, it becomes like a compass buried in your chest, unshakable, reliable, always pointing you toward what is right, even when the path vanishes. You no longer look outward for guidance. You have learned to listen to the silence within. And in that silence, clarity blooms. With clarity comes peace, the kind of peace not dependent on favorable conditions, but resilient against all storms. It is not the fragile calm that lasts only until someone mocks you or misunderstands you. It's the deep stillness that remains when others question, doubt, or even attack. You no longer waste energy proving yourself because you understand the sacredness of your time, your mind, your spirit. These are no longer up for negotiation. This shift is subtle, yet undeniable. You begin to walk differently, not with arrogance, but with grounded certainty. You begin to speak differently, not with endless words, but with fewer and heavier ones. You decide differently, not from desperation, but with intention, and others feel it. They may not know why they are drawn to you, why your words land with weight, why your calm unsettles their chaos, but they feel it because you have cultivated what most run from: inner stillness. Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Delay is silence in motion. It is choosing to pause instead of lash out, choosing to observe instead of react, choosing to hold your peace rather than surrender it to provocation. This discipline does not cage you, it frees you. For when you stop being controlled by the noise outside, you finally command yourself. I once knew a man who embodied this. In his youth, he fought every battle, argued every insult, defended every wound. His life was a battlefield of small wars, and he was always exhausted. Years later, when I met him again, he was different, quieter, stronger. He had learned restraint. When insulted, he did not react. When provoked, he did not flinch. He simply stood steady, calm as stone. People respected him more when he said less. His silence became his shield, his restraint became his strength. Here lies the paradox most overlooked. Silence is not emptiness. It is expression at its highest form. The one who no longer needs to shout has already won the greater battle. The one who no longer seeks to prove has already proven everything that matters. Noise fades with the crowd. Presence endures long after silence returns. So let your life be the proof of what you know. Let your decisions, your patience, your restraint reveal the lessons carved into you by hardship. Do not waste your truth on performance. Do not cast your pearls into hands unready to hold them. Protect it. Honor it. Let it reshape you fully before you offer it sparingly to others. For this is mastery, not to live loudly, but to live clearly. Not to dominate, but to remain anchored. Not to argue, but to embody. In time you will discover the great paradox of wisdom. The more you carry, the less you need to say. The deeper your insight, the more at ease you are with silence. And silence, when chosen, becomes your greatest language. From here, the journey bends again toward the realization that wisdom not only steadies you, it also exposes the world around you, revealing intentions and truths that noise alone can never hide. When silence has ripened within you, it stops being only a shield you hold close. It begins to breathe outward, shaping how the world bends around your presence. What once was private discipline now becomes quiet authority. You notice it in the way tension softens when you enter a room, or how voices lower without you asking. This is the turning point, where silence is no longer just your protection, but a force that unsettles illusions, reflects hidden truths, and draws respect without demand. From here, the path opens into a deeper truth. Strength revealed not by words, but by the gravity of stillness. Entering a new chapter, imagine this. You stand before a mountain lake at dawn. The surface is perfectly still, reflecting the sky like a flawless mirror. Yet beneath, unseen currents move. Fish glide, roots drink. Life stirs where no eye can see. This is how the discipline of silence works. When it matures, it is not empty, it is full. Its strength is hidden, but its presence is undeniable. From here, consider what happens when silence deepens beyond protection. It becomes a shield, yes, but also a mirror. A surface so calm that others cannot help but see themselves in it. Some will be unsettled, some will be drawn closer. For silence has a way of revealing not only who you are, but who they are. It strips away the noise they hide behind, and suddenly their motives, their fears, their insecurities stand exposed. This is why so many resist those who walk in quiet strength, because your calm reflects the storm they refuse to face. Marcus Aurelius warned himself, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Silence embodies this law. When insulted, you do not echo insult. When provoked, you do not answer with fire. You remain steady, and by doing so, you reveal the futility of their attack. They wanted reaction. They wanted proof they could reach you. Instead, they collide with the wall of your stillness and see their own weakness staring back at them. That is not passive. That is power refined. I once knew a woman who lived this with grace. Her workplace was filled with rivalry, whispers, and sharp words traded like weapons. She did not join the fray. She listened. She worked. She remained silent when accused of things she did not do. At first, colleagues mocked her, mistaking quiet for weakness. But as months passed, something shifted. The louder voices revealed themselves as petty. The gossips were unmasked by their own noise. And she became the one people trusted, the one sought out in crises. Not because she defended herself, but because her silence had made the truth visible. Here's the lesson: silence unmasks. A liar depends on confusion, on argument, on the fog of words. But when you do not add your own noise, their dishonesty stands naked. An insecure person thrives on pulling others into quarrels, refuse to engage, and their insecurity hangs in the air for all to see. You need not accuse, you need not explain. Your stillness does the unveiling. Epictetus once said, "If someone is mistaken, instruct them kindly, but if they resist, blame yourself for trying." Silence protects you from that mistake. It spares you the wasted energy of battling resistance, for the more you push, the more they cling. But the less you feed their fire, the faster it burns out. This is the paradox. Silence not only shields your peace, it turns their own actions into their undoing. Now imagine sitting across from someone who delights in chaos. They provoke, they prod, they laugh when you do not answer. Yet with every moment of calm you hold, their laughter falters. They grow restless, they push harder, but it only exposes their need for your reaction. You have become a mirror they cannot escape. And in that mirror, they see not your weakness, but their own. There was once a teacher I admired who practiced this relentlessly. Accusations were thrown at him, false and sharp. His students begged him to reply, to defend himself. He only smiled faintly and said nothing. Days passed. The falsehood unraveled on its own. Those who accused him lost their credibility, not because he fought, but because his refusal to fight exposed their malice. His silence weighed more than their words. Here lies the strength few dare to wield, to trust silence enough to let truth stand on its own. It demands courage, for the urge to explain is strong. The need to defend gnaws at you, but every time you resist, you sharpen your restraint into a blade finer than speech. You learn that not every accusation deserves an answer. Not every lie deserves correction. Not every critic deserves your energy. Think of it this way: a mirror never shouts. It never argues. It simply reflects. And in that reflection, truth cannot be denied. This is what silence becomes when you have mastered it. A mirror no one can escape. Some will respect it, some will resent it, but all will feel it. So let your silence reveal what words cannot. Let it strip away illusions, expose deceit, and unmask the shallow. Remember that silence is not withdrawal, but revelation. It does not hide the truth, it reflects it, brighter and sharper than any declaration. And as this truth takes hold, another lesson waits ahead, that silence does more than protect or reveal. It begins to shape the very space around you, drawing the right people, the right paths, and the right future into your orbit without a single wasted word. Moving into the next chapter, imagine the air thick with noise, arguments colliding, voices rising, demands thrown like stones. Yet, in the midst of this storm, one figure remains unmoved. He listens, he observes. His silence becomes the still point around which the chaos breaks. And slowly, something shifts. The crowd feels his steadiness more than any shouted word. This is where silence ceases to be only personal discipline. It becomes influence. Think of a fire burning in the distance. It does not run after those in the cold. It does not beg to be noticed. It stays where it is, and yet those shivering in the night walk toward it. Silence, once matured, does not run after notice. It stands, and others lean toward it as if pulled by an unseen tide. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. When others descend into noise, the temptation is strong to answer in kind, to argue, to defend, to prove. But when you resist, when you stay rooted, you reveal something their chaos cannot touch. Your calm becomes a kind of defiance. Your stillness unsettles precisely because it cannot be shaken. I knew a man once who had been humiliated in public. False accusations were thrown at him in front of a crowd. Others waited for his outburst. They expected fire. Instead, he stood silent, his face steady, his eyes calm. He gave no defense. The crowd grew uneasy. The accuser spoke louder, more frantic, trying to fill the void. But the silence stood taller than any word. Later, people remembered not the accusations, but the way he refused to be dragged down. His silence carried more weight than 1,000 rebuttals. Here is the paradox. Silence can be louder than speech. It carries a presence that unsettles because it leaves no ground to fight on. Arguments require resistance to survive. Remove the resistance, and they collapse under their own weight. This is why Seneca wrote, "It is better to conquer grief than to deceive it." In the same way, it is better to conquer the urge to argue than to feed it. Picture a stone dropped into still water. The ripples travel farther than the stone itself. So it is with composure. A single act of restraint creates effects beyond the moment. The room adjusts. The atmosphere changes. Even your enemies sense it. Some will mock it. Some will despise it. But they cannot ignore it. There was once a teacher who trained his students in this art. When provoked, they were told to stay silent, to listen, to hold. Many failed. They felt silence meant weakness. But over time, those who endured began to notice something. The aggressor always grew more agitated, more exposed. And the one who stayed silent always walked away stronger. They learned that silence is not the absence of strength. It is the presence of mastery. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And mastery shows itself most clearly not in action, but in restraint. Anyone can shout. Anyone can strike. Few can hold steady when every nerve screams to respond. That is freedom, the power not to be ruled by the noise outside, but by the command inside. I once watched a woman live this truth. In her workplace, colleagues tried to undermine her with gossip. She never joined their games. She did not defend herself, did not retaliate. She simply continued her work, steady and composed. At first they mocked her silence, but with time their schemes revealed themselves, while her dignity stood untouched. In the end, those who once whispered against her turned to her for counsel. Not because she argued her worth, but because she lived it. This is why silence must be seen not as withdrawal, but as strategy. It unsettles lies because it gives them nothing to cling to. It reveals truth by stripping away distraction. It protects your energy from being wasted on those determined not to understand. And most of all, it commands respect, not by demanding it, but by embodying it. Here's the cut of truth. The moment you rush to explain, you surrender authority. The moment you leap into argument, you place your worth in the hands of others. But when you stand in silence, you reclaim it. You no longer chase validation. You no longer beg to be understood. You become enough without permission. So let your silence speak where words would only weaken. Let your presence unsettle those who thrive on noise. Let your stillness reshape the air itself until others cannot help but feel it. This is not passivity. This is command. And as this truth settles, another rises. If silence can disarm enemies and expose pretenses, then it can also reshape relationships, showing you who respects your calm and who cannot bear to face it. That is where we now turn. Advancing further, imagine a storm raging across a wide plain. trees bend, branches snap, animals scatter, yet in the distance a mountain stands unmoved. The storm howls, but the mountain does not bow. This is what silence becomes when it matures into presence. It anchors you so deeply that the chaos of others no longer shakes your ground. At this stage, silence is not only the absence of words, it is a force that bends the space around you. People may not understand it, but they feel it. They notice how you do not rush to defend yourself, how you do not scatter your energy in proving or persuading. Instead, you hold steady, and your steadiness unsettles their noise. Marcus Aurelius urged himself to remain unshaken, like a rooted tree weathering countless winters. Storms pass, but the tree endures. So too does your silence, steady, alive, unbroken. I once met a man who embodied this truth. He had endured betrayal and loss, yet he no longer fought every insult or defended every wound. When others mocked him, he only looked back with calm eyes and said nothing. His silence was not surrender, it was strength. Over time, even those who ridiculed him began to lower their voices in his presence. His restraint became authority. His calm became respect. Think of it like clear water. When you refuse to stir it with noise, the surface reflects back what was always there. Some grow restless, some feel exposed, some even grow hostile because your silence strips away their cover. But others, those who are ready, are drawn closer. They sense that your presence carries something their noise cannot provide. That is the hidden power of silence. It both unsettles and attracts. Here lies the paradox. The less you try to command respect, the more respect begins to gather at your feet. The less you strive to prove, the more undeniable your truth becomes. Noise demands attention. Silence earns it. So let your presence be like the horizon, vast, untouchable, unmoved by passing storms. Let your restraint be the calm that steadies the restless. And remember, the most powerful words you ever speak are often the ones you never say. From here, the path turns toward a sharper truth. Silence not only protects and steadies, it begins to reveal what lies hidden in the hearts of others. Moving into the next chapter, imagine a battlefield after the storm of war. The noise has ended, but the air is thick with tension. Broken weapons lie scattered, smoke curls upward, and yet there is one figure standing still, unmoved, composed, unbroken. That is what silence becomes when it matures. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of strength so deep that chaos cannot shake it. Here's the paradox. Silence looks empty, but it carries weight. It unsettles the restless, not because it hides weakness, but because it conceals power. Seneca wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." Silence is that delay. It is the refusal to answer every provocation, the choice to let the storm pass before you move. And in that pause, you reveal not fragility, but control. I once knew a soldier who understood this. He had faced battles both on the field and within himself. In his youth, every insult lit his rage. Every challenge pulled him into pointless fights. But years of hardship taught him restraint. He learned that silence is sharper than any blade. When accused, he did not defend himself. When mocked, he did not respond. His enemies mistook him for weak until the moment he acted. Then his actions landed heavier than 1,000 words. His restraint was not passivity, it was precision. This is where silence begins to turn conflict into clarity. In the presence of someone who does not rise to bait, arguments collapse, lies dry up, noise loses its fuel. Think of a fire burning furiously. Remove the oxygen, and it dies. Your silence removes oxygen from the chaos others try to draw you into, and without you feeding it, the flames reveal their true size: small, fragile, desperate. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." What greater demonstration of this truth than silence? The world can shout, provoke, demand, but you decide whether to respond. Your calm becomes proof that no one else owns your mind, your energy, or your spirit. I once met a woman who lived by this law. Her workplace was filled with gossip and petty rivalries. She refused to join. She neither defended herself against rumors nor competed for attention. At first, she was dismissed as irrelevant, but slowly people noticed that accusations never stuck to her. They noticed that when chaos erupted, her silence drew respect. By doing nothing, she revealed everything. Those who gossiped exposed their own emptiness. Her quiet dignity exposed their noise. In time, even those who once mocked her turned to her for advice. This is the discipline that unsettles the world. Silence reflects, but it also reorders. It shows who thrives on noise and who carries real strength. It shows who needs constant validation and who has mastered themselves. And once you see it clearly, you realize something profound. Most of the battles you fought with words never needed fighting at all. Epictetus taught, if someone speaks badly of you, live so that no one will believe it. That is silence in action. No defense, no argument, just life itself as the proof. Your actions, your choices, your composure, these are stronger than rebuttals. When you live this way, accusations become meaningless. They bounce off the armor of presence. Here lies the hidden power. Silence does not only guard you, it bends the ground under your feet. People walk differently around someone who does not waste their breath. They speak more carefully, act more deliberately. They cannot help it. Your stillness demands it, not because you force them, but because your restraint unsettles their chaos. I recall another man, younger, who once fought every argument online. He believed words could win respect, but the more he argued, the less anyone listened. Years later, he stopped responding. He stopped trying to prove himself. His silence spoke louder than any reply. Those who once mocked him now wondered. They could not read him, and in that mystery he gained more respect than he ever did with words. This is why silence is not absence. It is presence distilled. It is the essence of Stoic practice, mastery of self before mastery of the world. The world screams, you wait. The world demands, you choose. The world mocks, you smile. And in that smile, there is power no insult can touch. So let your silence reshape the battles around you. Let it turn arguments into revelations. Let it strip the fuel from lies and the energy from noise. You do not need to announce your strength. You need only live it. The world will feel it. And as this lesson settles, the road ahead comes into view toward the even deeper truth that silence not only ends battles, but transforms them into victories you never had to fight for. Advancing into the next chapter, picture yourself walking into a crowded market at midday. Voices overlap, merchants shout, children cry, arguments flare. The air is thick with noise, but you move through it without haste, your steps steady, your eyes calm. People notice. Not because you shout above the crowd, but because you do not need to. Your silence makes the noise irrelevant. This is where the practice of stillness takes on a new dimension. It is no longer just about protecting yourself from chaos. It is about mastering how you move within it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Be like the rock against which the waves break, yet it stands firm." The rock does not fight the waves. It does not curse the storm. It simply remains, and in its stillness, the storm exhausts itself. I once met a man who embodied this presence. His workplace was filled with constant conflict, arguments over status, endless politics, petty rivalries. He rarely spoke in these storms. At first, others mocked him, calling him detached, even weak. But over time, his silence unsettled them. He became the one people turned to in crisis, the anchor when everything else spun out of control. Without raising his voice, he commanded more authority than those who fought daily for it. His silence revealed strength. Here's the paradox. Silence can become louder than noise. It carries a weight that arguments cannot match. Those who cannot master it spend their lives proving, defending, reacting. Those who master it, they draw others in without effort. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." To sit in silence while others waste themselves in noise is precisely that discipline. The fool chases recognition. The wise man lets recognition chase him. Think of a lake at dawn. The surface looks still, yet beneath, life moves. The silence is not empty, it is full of unseen power. So it is with a person who has mastered restraint. Their quiet is not void, it is depth. It unsettles the shallow precisely because it cannot be read, cannot be controlled, cannot be provoked. I once knew a woman who carried this weight. In meetings, she spoke only when necessary. She never argued for her place, never defended herself against petty accusations. Yet her words, when spoken, cut through the noise like steel. People leaned in. They remembered her sentences long after forgetting the speeches of others. Her silence gave her words gravity. Without it, her voice would have been just another sound in the crowd. This is why silence is not weakness. It is the refining of power. It is the choice to wait until action or speech has its maximum weight. Like an archer who does not loose his arrow at every target, but waits until the shot matters. And when it is released, it strikes with precision. Seneca warned, "It is better to conquer our grief than to deceive it." In the same way, it is better to master your tongue than to scatter your words. For words, once thrown, cannot be recalled. Silence is the training ground where you learn which battles deserve your energy and which dissolve on their own. The truth is, silence changes the way the world treats you. Those who once dismissed you as irrelevant begin to wonder. Those who once mocked your calm start to hesitate. And those who thought they could provoke you discover that their noise dies in your stillness. You have shifted the ground beneath them, not through dominance, but through discipline. I recall a story of a young man who argued endlessly online, fighting strangers in battles that never mattered. He believed victory came from the last word, but with time, he grew weary. He began to withhold his replies. At first, the silence was unbearable. He itched to answer. Yet slowly, he discovered that silence starved his opponents. Their insults lost energy, their fire burned out, and in the quiet he held, he found more strength than in any argument he had ever won. Here is the sharp truth. Every time you explain what needs no explanation, you spend your strength cheaply. Every time you defend yourself to those determined not to listen, you give away power. Silence preserves it. Silence multiplies it. Silence turns it into something undeniable. So let your stillness be your stance. Let your presence be your shield. Let your calm carry the weight that arguments cannot. You do not need to rush to prove. You do not need to chase recognition. In silence, you already hold what others are still scrambling to find. And as this realization deepens, the path leads us to an even higher ground. where silence is not only your defense and your discipline, but also the way you transform conflict itself into respect without ever raising your voice. Advancing to the next chapter, imagine a blade being forged in the fire. It is heated, hammered, and plunged into water again and again. What emerges is not just metal, it is precision, discipline, clarity. So it is with silence when carried into the heart of daily living. It is no longer simply about what you hold back. It becomes about what you cut away. Here's where the Stoics drew their sharpest line. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "If it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it." In silence, you refine both word and deed. You learn not to scatter your energy on what is unworthy. You measure before you speak. You pause before you act. And in that pause lies mastery. I once knew a man who was quick to argue. Every insult pulled him in. Every slight demanded defense. He thought this was strength, but all it did was bleed him dry. Years later, grief reshaped him. He grew quieter. He stopped defending. He stopped explaining. His calm unsettled people more than his old rage ever did. His silence had turned from shield to blade. It cut through noise without a single word. Think about how water shapes stone, not with fury, but with persistence. Drop by drop, it carves what once seemed unmovable. Silence works the same way. It doesn't shout. It wears down resistance by holding steady, by refusing to be moved by provocation. The one who remains still while others rage always wins the greater battle. Epictetus taught, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That mastery reveals itself in restraint, not in dramatic gestures, but in subtle strength. You walk into a crowded room and without saying a word, people sense your presence. You don't compete for noise. You don't scramble for attention. You sit, steady, and slowly the room bends toward you. But take note, this is not passivity. It is not retreat. It is deliberate force, sharpened by patience. Like the craftsman who measures twice before cutting once, you hold back until the moment is right. And when you finally speak or act, it carries weight. The world listens not because you shouted, but because you waited. I once saw a leader practice this in the middle of conflict. While others argued themselves hoarse, he said nothing. He let them burn their energy. Then, with a single sentence, he resolved what hours of debate could not. His silence had been the preparation. His words were the strike. That is the difference between noise and authority. So let your silence be your forge. Let it cut away the excess. Let it sharpen your focus, your words, your actions. You don't need to shout to command respect. You don't need to prove to carry power. Presence does the work for you. If this truth stirs something in you, write just one word in the comments: clarity. And if you want to keep walking this path of discipline, subscribe so you don't miss the steps ahead. Because what comes next is even deeper. The moment when silence not only steadies your presence, but begins to expose illusions in others, turning every encounter into a mirror they cannot escape. At this stage, picture yourself standing at the edge of a storm. The wind howls, trees bend, branches snap. Yet, at the very center, there is a strange stillness. That center is you, when silence becomes not just a practice, but a way of being. While the world rages, you hold steady. You do not rush to match its noise. You anchor yourself in calm. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Be like the rock against which the waves break." The rock does not resist by shouting back at the sea. It resists by standing still. Silence, when matured, is this rock. It absorbs the force without losing form. It unsettles those who expected reaction, because nothing is more disarming than strength that refuses to perform. I once knew a man who lived this discipline. He had been mocked, slandered, provoked in countless ways. In his youth, he would have answered every word with fire, but age and loss taught him something sharper than retaliation. He stopped reacting. He stopped explaining. He let his silence be the reply. Those who mocked him eventually grew tired. Those who doubted him grew curious. And those who truly watched him began to respect the stillness that no storm could move. Here lies the paradox. Silence is not passivity, it is precision. To speak when necessary but never when baited, to act when required but never when provoked. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself. Freedom shows not in outbursts, but in restraint." You become untouchable the moment you stop letting others dictate your responses. Think of silence as a mirror. When someone hurls anger at you and you do not respond, they begin to see themselves. Their rage echoes back to them. Their insecurity hangs exposed. You did not accuse them. You did not fight them. You simply let your calm reveal the truth they wanted to hide. That is the weight of silence. It unmasks without effort. But this power must be carried with humility. Silence is not a weapon to punish others. It is a discipline to protect yourself. Seneca once wrote, "He who is brave is free." Bravery is not only found in battle, it is found in the refusal to surrender your peace, to stay quiet when noise tempts you, to walk away when conflict serves no purpose, to guard your time as sacred. So, here is the lesson. Let your stillness speak where words would be wasted. Let your presence unsettle the chaos without lifting your voice. The greatest power lies not in proving, but in being. And once you hold this truth, you will see how silence reshapes not only you, but the very world around you. From here, the path leads us into an even sharper truth. How silence does not only defend, but transforms conflict itself into an opportunity for strength. Advancing to the next chapter, imagine a torch burning in the open night. It does not scream for attention. It does not chase the crowd, yet all who wander in darkness are drawn to it. This is how silence matures, no longer just a shield to protect you, but a light that pulls others without demand. Consider how noise competes. People shout to be heard, argue to be seen, demand space through volume, but silence, when rooted in discipline, becomes gravity. It pulls instead of pushes. It commands not by force, but by presence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That is not a call to argument. It is a call to live so steadily that your very composure unsettles chaos. I recall a woman who carried this truth. Betrayal had scarred her deeply, yet she did not spend her days explaining her pain or seeking pity. She became quiet, focused, intentional. Over time, those who mocked her silence began to notice her steadiness. They leaned closer, not because she asked, but because they felt something rare. Her peace drew them more powerfully than any speech ever could. Here lies the paradox. The less you chase recognition, the more people begin to sense your worth. The less you explain yourself, the more your life speaks. In a world addicted to noise, silence becomes irresistible. Those who are shallow will be disturbed by it. Those who are sincere will be pulled toward it. Think of a tree in the middle of a square. It does not announce its strength. It simply stands, offering shade, and yet people gather under its branches. So too does quiet presence offer what noise never can. Not performance, not persuasion, but refuge. Seneca once warned that the one who boasts of wisdom proves only their vanity. True wisdom has no urgency to announce itself. It attracts by the weight of its reality. Influence built on speeches fades. Influence built on being cannot be shaken. So let your silence draw instead of chase. Let your stillness disturb the restless and comfort the honest. Without a word, you show what others cannot explain. And as this lesson settles, another rises. The realization that silence not only attracts, but transforms conflict itself into an arena where restraint becomes your greatest weapon. Advancing into the next chapter, imagine a battlefield just before dawn. The armies aligned, weapons drawn, but silence hangs over the field. No clash, no roar, only stillness heavy enough to make hearts tremble. That silence is not weakness. It is strength waiting, measuring, choosing the precise moment to act. This is how conflict transforms when silence is mastered. Most people rush to defend themselves, to prove, to retaliate. They waste energy on battles unworthy of their spirit. But the Stoics knew better. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." To hold silence in conflict is to refuse surrender of your mind. It is to deny the enemy access to your peace. I once knew a man who was constantly provoked by insults. Every word pulled him into a fight. He lost friends, jobs, and time chasing the satisfaction of winning arguments. Years later, he learned restraint. When mocked, he simply smiled, offering no reply. His silence unsettled those who sought his anger. Over time, they stopped trying because his refusal to engage starved their power. His silence won more victories than his shouts ever had. Think of how fire dies without fuel. Conflict is the same. Arguments burn only as long as you feed them with reaction. Withdraw your voice, and the flame suffocates. This is not surrender. It is mastery. To step aside from petty wars so that your energy remains whole for battles that truly matter. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." The greatest chains are forged not by others, but by our own compulsive need to answer every strike. Freedom comes when you no longer leap at the bait. Your silence becomes your fortress, unbreached by insult, unbroken by scorn. Picture entering a heated room where voices clash like thunder. Instead of joining, you sit steady, composed. Slowly, eyes turn to you. Not because you shouted louder, but because your stillness outlasted their noise. This is the paradox of restraint. To command without lifting a sword, to influence without spilling a word. So let your silence turn conflict into revelation. Let it expose who feeds on chaos and who carries dignity. Let it show the futility of their noise and the depth of your control. And as you master this art, the path leads further, toward the moment when silence not only ends battles, but reshapes the very ground on which they are fought. Advancing into the next chapter, picture a torch burning steadily in the night. It does not flare wildly, nor does it cry for attention. Yet its light reaches far, guiding those who are lost and exposing what hides in shadow. That is what silence becomes once it matures. Not just a shield for yourself, but a beacon others cannot ignore. At this stage, silence carries a presence that unsettles illusions. It reveals truths people would rather leave hidden. You do not argue, yet deception collapses in your calm. You do not boast, yet your steadiness makes noise look hollow. Seneca reminded us, "Things that were hard to bear are sweet to remember." What feels heavy now, holding restraint when every part of you wants to speak, later becomes the very memory that proves your strength. I once met a leader whose silence held more influence than speeches. In meetings filled with noise, he often sat quietly, listening, measuring. People grew uneasy at first, misreading his stillness for indifference. But when he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of stone, measured, grounded, undeniable. His silence had prepared the ground so that even a few words could shift the entire room. That is the discipline the Stoics spoke of, to act not from impulse, but from mastery. Imagine a sculptor chiseling stone. Each strike is deliberate, each pause intentional. The pauses are not absence, they are part of the art. So it is with silence. The world rushes, shouts, competes to be heard, but wisdom knows the power of waiting. You speak only when words can match the gravity of your truth, and when you do, they echo far beyond the moment. Here lies the paradox. Silence is both restraint and revelation. It hides nothing, yet it forces others to see themselves. It seeks no recognition, yet it draws respect naturally. It is not a tool of escape, but of mastery. So let your silence burn like that torch, steady, unyielding, lighting the way without demanding applause. Protect it, refine it, and trust that when the time comes, your quiet presence will speak louder than any storm. From here, the path opens into a deeper mystery. The way, silence does not just change how others see you, but how you begin to see the world itself. That is how you guard your strength and allow it to deepen without disturbance. Once you discover the secret, once you taste the kind of clarity that cannot be bought or borrowed, you will understand why it must be protected. Not to hide it from others, but to honor it within yourself, so it can keep guiding you, refining you, and shaping you into something unshakable. In a world that rushes to speak, choose the discipline of silence. In a world that drowns itself in noise, choose the calm of stillness. And in a world desperate for recognition, choose the quiet power of becoming so steady that your presence is felt even when no words are spoken. That is when you realize the secret was never meant to be shouted. It was meant to be lived fully, quietly, and completely. If this message resonates with you, write just 2 words in the comments. Keep silent. And if you wish to walk deeper on this path, subscribe so you do not miss what is waiting ahead. Carry this with you. The quietest strength is often the strongest. And the next lesson will take us further into how silence not only guards your truth, but